Hey friends! Glad you're here at the fiction world. We've cooked up something special. What if Deku became overlord of hell and bred every demon queen in Hazbin Hotel? Deku x Harem. Liking and subscribing really helps us out. Okay, story time. Chapter 1, Descent. The last thing Izuku Midoriya felt before he died was warmth. Not the burning kind, not the kind that had eaten through his arms over years of pushing one for all past every limit his body could hold. This was different. This was the warmth of something finishing, the way a fire feels in its final minute before the wood runs out and it gives everything it has left in one long, perfect exhale. The rift had been open for 6 hours. 6 hours of heroes pouring everything they had into containing it, sealing it, redirecting it, every strategy, every quirk, every body thrown at the problem. The rift didn't care. It sat in the middle of what used to be Central Musudafu and pulled at reality like a child pulling at a loose thread in a sweater, and the sweater was the membrane between the living world and something that had no name in any language humans had invented yet. Izuku had understood what needed to happen before anyone said it out loud. He'd understood it the way he'd always understood things, not through calculation, even though the calculation was there too, scratched across the inside of his skull in that handwriting that never stopped. He understood it through feeling, through the gut certainty that had guided him through every impossible situation since he was a quirkless kid who hadn't learned yet that the world expected him to stay small. The feeling said, only one for all can close it, and one for all has to go in with it. Toshinori had grabbed his arm. Izuku had seen the man's face, the real face, the hollowed-out post-all-might face, and had smiled at him. Not a brave smile, not the performed kind. A real one. Because Izuku had made his peace with it faster than he would have expected, and that told him something about how tired he'd actually been. "I'm okay," he'd said. That was all. Then he'd run. One for all ignited from his feet to his skull and he ran at the rift like it owed him something, and every step cracked the pavement, and the air around him turned green and electric and the whole world seemed to hold its breath, and he went in, and he pulled, and he put everything he had ever been into the closing of that wound in reality, and the rift sealed. And Izuku Midoriya ceased to exist in any world that living people could reach. What came after wasn't darkness. That was the first surprise. He'd expected darkness, or nothing, or maybe that soft white nothing that near-death experiences always described. What he got instead was red, a red so deep and so present that it wasn't a color so much as an atmosphere, a pressure, something you breathed rather than saw. He was falling. Or something like falling. The sensation of movement without any wind, without any resistance, the kind of falling that happens inside a dream where you know intellectually that there should be fear but your body hasn't gotten the message yet. Below him, or around him, the geometry wasn't entirely stable, something enormous moved. Not a creature. Not exactly. More like the idea of a creature, scaled to a size that made the concept of size feel embarrassed. Something ancient and red-eyed and deeply, deeply annoyed at having its space interrupted. And then the warmth hit. One for all had come with him. He felt it the way you feel sunlight on your face after coming in from the cold, sudden, total, undeniable. The quirk hadn't died when he did. It had followed. All of it. Every predecessor's worth of power and will and stubborn human refusal to stay down, compressed into a soul that had spent its entire life being a container for other people's hope. In the living world, it had made him the strongest hero alive. Here, with no body to break and no limiter to respect and nothing between the power and the raw dark of this place, the red thing stopped moving. In all the ancient and patient and vast history of whatever that entity was, Izuku would later understand, nothing had ever lit up in the dark the way he did in that moment. Nothing human had ever arrived here carrying that kind of fire. The red thing looked at him, really looked, the full weight of something that had existed since before humanity had words, and then it did something no one who'd known it had ever seen it do. It got out of the way. He landed, actually landed, feet on actual ground, in front of a building that should not have existed. It looked like a hotel. A nice hotel, even, in the same way that a theater set looks like a real place if you don't examine the backing too hard. Red and pink and gold, towers that spiraled at angles that made sense emotionally if not architecturally, a sign above the door that read Hazbin Hotel in letters that glowed with a warmth that felt almost deliberately cheerful. Around it, the city, because it was a city, enormous and hellish and crackling with the kind of energy that suggested everyone in it was trying to be louder than everyone else, pulsed and roared and stank of sulfur and ambition. Izuku stood in front of the hotel door for about 4 seconds. He was dead, he was in hell, he was carrying enough spiritual energy to light up a stadium, and there was a hotel. He tried the door. It was unlocked. The lobby was pink and red and staffed by a demon who looked like he'd been designed by someone who'd been told to make a Spider-Man but had only ever seen the word spider written down and decided to be creative about the rest. 8 eyes, white suit, smile that arrived before the rest of his face did. Well, the spider demon said, and his voice had the particular quality of someone who treated everything as though it was performing specifically for his entertainment. What do we have here? New arrival. You smell fresh, honey, like, concerningly fresh, like you just, he leaned forward, 8 eyes narrowing. Hold on. What is that? Izuku looked down at himself. He looked different. Not wrong, exactly. He was still himself, same build, same mess of dark hair, same constellation of scars across his hands and arms. But there was something on him now, or in him, or around him. A faint green luminescence that clung to his skin like he'd been dipped in aurora borealis. Every scar was lit. The air around him moved in a way that air near powerful things moves, cautiously, respectfully. I don't know, Izuku said honestly. I just got here. The spider demon's smile widened into something that looked genuinely delighted. A fresh one who doesn't know. Angel, go get Charlie, I found something interesting. I'm not your errand boy, said a voice from the direction of the bar, and Izuku turned to find an angel, an actual white-winged angel, which felt like the strangest thing in the room until he'd re-examined the spider demon, sitting on a bar stool with a drink and the expression of someone who'd heard that sentence before and was tired of it. Angel, please. Fine. Jesus. The angel knocked back the rest of his drink and disappeared upstairs with a laziness that suggested he was going to take his time about it. Izuku turned back to the spider demon. Is this, he stopped. Reconsidered the question. Started again. Where am I? Specifically. The Hazbin Hotel, the demon said, spreading his arms like he was presenting something magnificent, which he seemed to genuinely believe he was. Hell's premier establishment for the rehabilitation of sinners. Currently operating at a capacity of, he counted on his fingers. Like 3 people if you count me, which I do. I'm a Laster. Radio demon. Overlord. Delightful conversationalist. He extended a hand. And you are? Izuku Midoriya. Alaster took his hand. And then Alaster stopped. His smile didn't disappear. Izuku would come to understand that Alaster's smile was structural, that it existed independently of whatever he was actually feeling, but something behind his eyes changed. Like a man who'd reached into a bag expecting a coin and found a live wire. My, Alaster said softly. My. He dropped the handshake. Izuku looked at him steadily. What? Nothing at all, Alaster said, and stepped back exactly 1 step, and that 1 step said everything his voice was carefully not saying. Welcome to the hotel, Mr. Midoriya. I have a feeling you're going to be very interesting. Charlie Morningstar came down the stairs like she'd been told the building was on fire and had decided to approach it at an enthusiastic jog rather than a sprint. She was blonde, bright-eyed, wearing a red coat over a white shirt, and she radiated the very specific energy of someone who had decided to be optimistic about everything as a survival strategy and had been doing it so long that it had become genuine. She was also, clearly, a demon princess. Izuku could feel the power in her the way you feel the depth of water when you're swimming. It was there, it was significant, and it was being kept very carefully, not quite at the surface. "Oh," she said, stopping at the foot of the stairs and looking at Izuku with an expression that was 90% delight and 10% the very rapid processing of something she hadn't expected. "Hi. You're new. And she tilted her head. "You're really bright. People keep noticing that," Izuku said. "Sorry, I'm Charlie. This is my hotel. Are you here wait, did you just arrive in hell? Like just now?" She was already moving toward him, already pulling a clipboard from somewhere that shouldn't have had room for a clipboard. "Because we have an intake process, it's not super formal yet, we're still working out the kinks, but the idea is that everyone who comes through here gets a chance to, Charlie." A new voice, this one with the flat edge of someone who did not share Charlie's default emotional setting. A woman appeared from a hallway to the left, dark hair, single eye visible behind a pale patch, short and lean and holding herself with the posture of someone who'd been in enough fights to have stopped announcing them. "Charlie, slow down. Look at him." Charlie looked. A beat. "I'm looking," she said. "Look harder," Vaggie said. She was looking at Izuku like he was a variable she hadn't been given enough information to calculate, and the uncertainty bothered her, and the way it bothered her was by making her very still. "What are you carrying?" Izuku met her eye. He'd been assessed by people in his life, by heroes, by villains, by people who needed to understand whether he was a threat or an asset, and he'd learned to recognize the quality of the attention. Vaggie's attention was the sharpest kind. The kind that was trying to keep someone safe. "It's called One for All," he said. "It's a quirk." Was a quirk. I'm not sure what the right tense is anymore. "What does it do?" "Gives you the power of everyone who ever held it." He paused. "Plus whatever they were building toward." And what were they building toward? He considered the question honestly. Something strong enough to face anything. Vaggie was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "And you're dead." "Yeah. And instead of going wherever heroes go when they die, you ended up here." "Seems like it." She looked at him for another long moment, then looked at Charlie. Charlie was doing the thing where her optimism and her intelligence were fighting each other visibly on her face, and the intelligence was saying this is unusual and possibly complicated, and the optimism was saying yes, but what if it's amazing, and from the look of it, the optimism was winning, which seemed to be its normal outcome. "He can stay," Charlie said. "Charlie, he can stay, Vaggie. Look at him. He's not trying to hide anything, he's not scheming, he's here." She turned back to Izuku with a smile that was warm enough to feel like actual light. "You can stay. We'll figure out the rest." Izuku looked at her. Looked at the hotel around him, this ridiculous hopeful building sitting in the middle of hell. Looked at Vaggie, who was still watching him like he might do something unexpected. He thought about the rift. About Toshinori's face. About the warmth of something finishing. "Okay," he said. "Thank you." Alastair, as it turned out, had opinions about everything, most of them delivered with the cadence of a man who'd spent several decades broadcasting alone and had never quite lost the habit of treating conversation as performance. He showed Izuku to a room on the third floor with the air of a man doing a fascinating experiment, asking questions that seemed casual and weren't, and Izuku answered them directly, which seemed to unsettle Alastair in a way that pleased him. "So you sealed a dimensional rift," Alastair said, leaning against the doorframe of the room with his staff planted beside him like punctuation. "With your own life force." "With my quirk. My life came along for the ride. And you don't find that upsetting?" Izuku set down the very small bag of things that had somehow manifested along with his soul, his notebook, his pen, a worn-down All Might keychain that had been in his pocket, and looked around the room. Red walls, decent bed, window that looked out over a city that gleamed like a coal fire. "I knew what I was doing. Most people who say that are wrong. I wasn't." Alastair studied him. That smile, constant and layered and somehow communicating everything except warmth. You know what you feel like, Mr. Midoriya? Tell me. You feel like a very, very old key, Alastor said, that someone has just put in a lock it was made for without knowing the lock existed. Izuku looked at him. What's the lock? Alastor's smile curved at a new angle. Now that, he said, is the interesting question. He pushed off the doorframe. Get some rest. Hell doesn't sleep, but apparently you still might. And in the morning, he paused, already turning away. Try not to walk through walls. You've been doing it without noticing. Izuku looked down at his feet. He was, in fact, slightly inside the floorboard. He stepped up. Right, he said. Thanks. Delightful, Alastor said, and left. He didn't sleep. He sat on the bed and looked at the city through the window and tried to feel sad about being dead, because it seemed like the right response, and found that what he felt instead was something harder to name. Not relief, exactly. Not excitement. Something between the two, the feeling of having put down something very heavy and not yet decided whether to pick up something new. One for all moved through him like a tide. Without a body to constrain it, without the biological limits that had spent years being the battle between what it wanted to do and what he could survive, it felt different. Larger. More itself. He could feel the predecessors, not as voices, exactly, they weren't that present anymore, but as currents, each one a distinct quality of will. Nana Shimura's steadiness. Banjo's raw joy. The first's iron patience. All of them, alive in him, and him in them, and the whole compound weight of it sitting in his chest like a second heart. In the living world he'd needed to hold it carefully, regulate it, push it out in measured doses or the feedback would have destroyed him. Here, it just was. Like breathing. Like existing. He pressed his hand against the window glass, not quite sure if his hand would pass through it or not, and it didn't, which was progress, and below him the city of hell churned and roared and lit itself in shades of red and gold and deep blood orange, towers like broken teeth, streets full of demons moving with the particular purposefulness of people in a city that never stops. He thought, I could go home. He thought, home is gone. He thought, then this is home. Not with grief. With the clean, forward-facing certainty that had always been the truest thing about him, the thing that had gotten him through a quirkless childhood, through a teacher who barely glanced at him, through the years of breaking himself to become something worth being. The certainty that wherever he was, whatever the problem, you moved forward. He pulled his hand from the glass. Opened his notebook. Wrote, Hell. Hazbin Hotel. One for all is intact. Charlie Morningstar, royalty, genuine. Vaggy, sharp, protective. Alastor, powerful, watching. Something in hell noticed me when I arrived. Figure out what. He underlined the last sentence. Then added below it, don't apologize for existing here. This place chose you. That was new. He'd never written something like that before. But it felt right in a way that earned it. Charlie found him at what passed for dawn in hell, a slow bleeding of the red sky into something slightly more orange, sitting on the hotel's front step with his notebook open and a cup of something that Nifty, the tiny one-eyed demon who seemed to run the hotel's domestic operations with the energy of a caffeinated hornet, had pressed into his hands and told him to drink. It tasted like black coffee and something underneath the black coffee that made his teeth feel like they'd been polished. You're not sleeping, Charlie said, sitting beside him. No. Is it the noise? Hell is loud, I know, I grew up with it, I forget that it might be, it's not the noise. He closed the notebook. I was thinking. About what? He looked at her. In daylight, in whatever passed for daylight, she looked younger than she'd seemed last night, and simultaneously much older. The royalty showed more in the morning. The power was quieter but present, like the deep note in a chord that you feel more than hear. About what I'm supposed to do here, he said. Charlie was quiet for a moment. Then she said, you don't have to be supposed to do anything. That's kind of the point of the hotel. You can just be here. Figure it out. That's not usually how I work. How do you usually work? He turned to look at the city. A building in the middle distance was on fire, which appeared to be standard operating procedure rather than an emergency. 3 demons were having what looked like a serious business negotiation over the body of a 4th demon, who may or may not have been an active participant. A massive billboard advertised something in a language that wasn't quite any language, but that he found he could read anyway, which was one of several things about being dead that was going to take getting used to. I find the problem, he said, and I go toward it. Charlie followed his gaze over the city. Hell has a lot of problems. I know. She looked at him sideways. You're not scared of any of this, are you? He thought about that honestly. About the red thing he'd felt when he was falling, the vast entity that had looked at him and gotten out of the way. About Alastair's assessment, key in a lock. About the way his power moved through him now like it was home here, like the darkness and pressure of this place was exactly the environment it had always been trying to grow into. No, he said. I'm not. Charlie smiled. It was a different smile from last night, smaller, quieter, something slightly wondering in it. That's either going to be great, she said, or very, very interesting. Why not both? She laughed, and it surprised her, the laugh. He could tell by the way her hand went up to cover it before she let it be. Okay, she said. Okay, yeah. Why not both? The trouble started before breakfast. It arrived in the form of 2 demons who crashed through the hotel's front window at speed, trailing debris and what appeared to be a genuine attempt to kill each other that had only incidentally entered the building. They were large, 1 horned, 1 winged, and they hit the lobby floor in a tangle of claws and screaming and destruction that sent Nifty diving behind the desk and sent the staircase railing into 4 pieces. Charlie was on her feet before Izuku was, moving toward them with her hands up and her voice at the specific pitch of someone who has had a lot of practice trying to talk chaos down. Hey! Hey, hey, stop, this is a place of... The horned demon flung the winged demon sideways and the winged demon hit the wall and Charlie got knocked off her feet by the shockwave and Izuku caught her without thinking about it, one hand out, green lightning crackling up his arm as the force washed over him like nothing. He set Charlie back on her feet. Then he walked toward the demons. The horned one saw him coming and made the mistake of interpreting his approach as an invitation. It swung at him, massive arm like a falling tree, and Izuku didn't dodge. He stepped into it, one hand catching the wrist, and the green of one for all pulsed once, a single compression of all that inherited will, and the demon stopped. Not because Izuku threw it. Not because he hit back. Because the demon felt, in the grip of that hand, what it was touching, and every instinct it had that had kept it alive in hell started screaming. Izuku held its gaze. He didn't threaten. He didn't perform. He just looked at it with the complete, undivided, unafraid attention of someone who had spent their entire life walking toward things that were bigger than them, and said, quietly, "You're done." The demon left. The other demon looked at Izuku for approximately 1 second, looked at the door its partner had exited through, and followed. Silence. Then Nifty popped up from behind the desk with a broom and started cleaning the window debris with the cheerful efficiency of someone who found the whole thing bracing. Charlie was staring at Izuku. Vaggie was standing at the bottom of the stairs, hand on her weapon, and she was also staring. "You didn't even power up," Charlie said. "I didn't need to." Those are class 4 demons, they've been terrorizing this block they're not coming back, Izuku said. Vaggie's hand was still on her weapon. But she didn't raise it. She looked at Izuku for a long moment, that calculating look, recalibrating, and then she said, very carefully, "What are you?" Izuku looked back at her with the same honesty he'd been giving everyone since he arrived. "Someone who came from a world that needed heroes," he said, "and got dropped in one that needs something else. I'm still working out the specifics." Vaggie's hand dropped from her weapon. Not because she trusted him. He could tell it wasn't that yet. But because whatever the answer was to what he was, it was better than anything she'd had in the possibilities she'd been running. The something that moved in hell when Izuku arrived, the ancient, vast, deeply inconvenienced something, sent a representative that afternoon. It arrived as a ripple in the air outside the hotel, like heat shimmer with intent, and it settled into a form that was less body and more impression of one, the outline of enormity made compact out of courtesy, or possibly condescension. Izuku stood outside and felt it arrive the way you feel weather changing. The presence extended toward him, not a hand, not language, something older than both, and made a query. It wasn't words. It was more like a question shaped in pressure and darkness and ancient rite. What are you? He answered it the same way he'd answered everyone else. Izuku Midoriya. I'm not from here. I carried something here that it turns out fits. The presence was quiet for what felt like a long time. Then it answered. Also not in words. In something more like acknowledgement, the vast and impersonal kind, the kind a mountain gives you when you reach its peak, not welcome, exactly, but recognition. You are here. You withstood the reaching. You are therefore real. And with that came something else. A sense of territory. Of borders. Of the shape of hell as a place that had a structure, a hierarchy, rules that were as much physics as politics, and somewhere at the top of that structure there was a space. A space that had been waiting. He stood outside the hotel and looked up at the red-orange sky of hell and felt the weight of that space like a crown held over his head, and he thought of Toshinori, who had passed one for all to a boy who didn't know yet what he was carrying, and he thought that this might be what that had felt like on the other side. He didn't reach for it. Not yet. But he didn't step back from it either. Behind him, he heard Charlie open the door and felt her stop in the doorway, feeling what he was feeling, watching what was happening, and not speaking because she understood somehow that this wasn't a moment for speech. He turned around. She was watching him with that particular expression again, intelligence and optimism in their ongoing negotiation, and the intelligence was winning more ground this time. There was something in her eyes that was less this is a new guest and more this is something that changes things. Dinner's ready, she said. Because she was Charlie, and the hotel was her project, and even when hell was rearranging itself around someone's arrival, she kept the rhythms going, which was its own kind of courage. Izuku nodded. Went inside. The presence outside dissipated, slowly, like smoke, like something satisfied that it had confirmed what it came to confirm. In the lowest levels of hell, in towers and palaces and the smoking ruins of places that had been powerful once, things that had been still for a very long time began, almost imperceptibly, to move. Something had arrived in the dark. And the dark had looked at it, and recognized it, and made room. Chapter 2, The Weight of a Crown. The news that something new had landed in hell traveled the way all important news traveled there, faster than it should, louder than anyone wanted, and with enough distortion in the retelling that by the time it reached the 4th district it had already become 3 different stories. Version 1, a mortal hero had sealed himself into hell and was now running loose in Pentagram City with enough power to level a district. Version 2, the radio demon had acquired a new pet. Version 3, which was the closest to accurate and therefore the least believed, something had come through from the living world carrying a light that the oldest things in hell had felt and stepped back from, and it was currently eating dinner in Charlie Morningstar's charity project of a hotel and acting completely unbothered. Vox heard all 3 versions within an hour because Vox heard everything within an hour. His face was a television screen, his entire empire was built on information, and information in hell was the only currency that didn't eventually devalue. He was sitting in his tower watching the feeds when his screens lit up with the ripple, that pressure change across the spiritual architecture of hell, that something shifted sensation that even demons who weren't paying attention would have felt in their teeth. He replayed it 14 times. Then he called Valentino, who didn't answer, and Velvet, who answered immediately and had already started talking before he could say anything. I felt that, she said. Whatever it was, I felt it. Someone arrived, Vox said. Someone important arrived. A pause, the sound of her moving fast through whatever space she was in. Where's Alastair? Vox's screen face flickered with a static that, on him, functioned as a grimace. The hotel. Another pause. This one carried weight. Of course he is, Velvet said. Dinner at the Hazbin Hotel was, Izuku discovered, a production. Not a grand one, the hotel was too sparsely populated for grand, but a committed one. Nifty cooked with the intensity of someone defusing a bomb, except she was cheerful about it, and the table was set with the kind of deliberate care that said someone believed in the ritual of the thing even when the thing was just 5 people around a table in hell. 5 people. Charlie at the head, Vaggie to her left, Angel Dust sprawled in his chair with the studied nonchalance of someone whose casual posture had been calculated to achieve a specific effect. Alastair standing rather than sitting, plate in hand, which seemed to be his standard operating procedure. And Izuku, who sat down, picked up his fork, and found that the food looked and tasted like real food, which was either a mercy or a sign that hell had a better catering budget than its reputation suggested. Angel Dust was looking at him with undisguised curiosity and the expression of someone who decided the fastest path to information was the most direct one. "So you're the one who made the big boom this morning," Angel said. "When you grabbed those 2 idiots." "I didn't really grab them," Izuku said. "You stopped a class 4 demon with one hand and looked bored doing it." "I wasn't bored. I was focused." Angel pointed a finger at him. "That's worse." Charlie cleared her throat in the way she did when she was trying to steer a conversation without appearing to steer it, which was a technique that worked much better when people around her weren't paying close attention. "I was thinking," she said, "that we could use today as an opportunity to talk about what you're planning to do," Vaggie finished. Not unkindly. But Vaggie's version of gentle redirection involved making sure the actual subject got named. She was looking at Izuku. Everyone was looking at Izuku, in their various ways, Charlie with hopeful curiosity, Vaggie with careful assessment, Angel with the lazy sharpness of someone who looked uninterested as a tactic, Alastair with that layered smile that was a mask and knew it and didn't particularly care that you knew. Izuku set down his fork. "I want to understand how this place works," he said. "The hierarchy. Who holds what, why they hold it, what the actual pressure points are." "That's a lot of information gathering for someone who just arrived," Vaggie said. "I've been gathering information about everything my whole life," he said. "It's how I work. Understand the situation first, then move. And when you move." He looked at her steadily. "I move." Vaggie held his gaze for a moment. Something in her expression shifted, not warmer, not yet, but the quality of her attention changed, like a lens refocusing. She'd been expecting deflection or performance. He hadn't given her either. Alastair set his plate down, on a side table, not the dining table, because apparently Alastair's relationship with shared meals was participatory but not fully committed, and folded his hands behind his back. "I can provide an education," he said, "though I should note that my perspective is not what you might call unbiased." "I know," Izuku said. "I want your perspective anyway. I'll account for the bias." A flicker behind Alastair's eyes. Not surprise, Alastair had stopped being surprised in the way most people meant the word sometime around 1933, but something adjacent to it. Interest, recalibrated upward. "Then let us discuss," Alastair said, "the shape of hell." The shape of hell, as Alastair explained it with the evident enjoyment of a man who loved the sound of his own voice but genuinely had useful things to say, was less a hierarchy than a compression. Power accumulated. Power defended itself. Power at sufficient density became territory, and territory in hell was the closest thing the place had to law. The overlords were the uppermost layer, demons who'd accumulated enough power and enough domain to be functionally sovereign. Not kings, not exactly. More like tectonic plates, enormous, slow-moving, and catastrophic when they ground against each other. Carmilla Carmine. Zestial Mox. Vox. Alastair himself, before his disappearance and return. Below them, the middle management of hell, sinners, demons born of the place, the whole churning mass of the damned going about the business of being damned in a city that never closed. Above them all, in theory, in tradition, in the stories that hell told itself, the morning star name. Lucifer. His queen, Lilith. Their daughter Charlie, which was the part nobody in hell was entirely sure what to do with, because Charlie was doing something with her inheritance that nobody had done before, which was try to use it to help. And the extermination, Izuku said. Silence around the table. The specific silence of a subject that hits multiple people in the same wound. Charlie looked at her plate. Vaggy's jaw tightened. Angel picked at the label on his drink with one of his extra hands. Alastair was the one who answered, and he did it in the same carrying tone he used for everything, which meant either he was the only one for whom it didn't hurt or he was the best at not showing it. Heaven sends exterminators to hell once a year, he said. They cull the population. No warning, no criteria, no appeal. His smile stayed in place but something in it went flat, the way a fire goes flat when you push a wet log onto it. It is, as you might imagine, unpopular. Charlie stopped it, Vaggy said. Her voice was carefully neutral, which was the voice of someone who had strong feelings about something and was choosing when to deploy them. Last year. She negotiated a deal. I had help, Charlie said. You drove it, Vaggy said, and the way she said it, quiet, certain, like she'd written the sentence down 100 times in her head to make sure she said it right, told Izuku more about the two of them than anything else had so far. He filed it all away. Opened his notebook, it had been sitting beside his plate, which nobody had commented on, which he appreciated, and wrote quickly. Not the facts, those he had. The shape of them. The way the power sat, where it was load-bearing, where it was ornamental. When he looked up, Charlie was watching him write with an expression that was half fascinated and half something more cautious. You're mapping it, she said. Yeah. Why? He looked at her directly. Because I'm going to need to know where to push. Charlie sat with that for a moment. Push toward what? I don't know yet. But something is moving in this place. The thing I felt last night, that presence, it wasn't random. It was deciding something. He put the pen down. I want to be ahead of whatever it's deciding. That presence, Alastair said, and his voice had a careful quality to it now, the quality of something being weighed before being offered, is not something most demons feel. Not directly. Not like that. I felt it clearly. Yes. Alastair looked at him. That's rather the point, isn't it? The first Overlord came to look at Izuku the next morning. Not in person. Not directly. That was a power statement in itself. In hell, direct confrontation was for the desperate or the confident, and the overlords who had survived long enough to matter had learned the difference between the two. Instead, a delegation arrived at the hotel door, 3 demons in expensive black, faces blank with professional courtesy, carrying a sealed message in an envelope that was either gilt-edged paper or compressed shadow, the light wasn't quite stable enough to tell. The message was from Zestial Mox. Izuku read it at the front desk while Nifty dusted around him and Charlie read over his shoulder without quite admitting she was reading over his shoulder. To the newcomer currently disturbing the equilibrium of our domain, I would extend an invitation to meet, at your convenience, in a setting of your choosing. I believe we have matters of mutual interest to discuss. Come alone, or not. I shall not specify. He never sends messages, Charlie said. She sounded odd and slightly alarmed, which from Charlie was a combination that required genuinely significant information to produce. He's been in hell longer than almost anyone. He doesn't reach out. He reached out, Izuku said. That means he's paying attention. Good. He folded the message and put it in his notebook. I'll meet him. But not yet. I need 3 more days. 3 more days for what? To understand the hotel. He looked at her. Your project, what you're building here. I need to understand what it actually is before I decide how to protect it. Charlie went still. Not the frozen kind of still, the kind where movement has stopped because something is happening internally that needs the full processing power. How to protect it, she repeated. You have an idea that matters, he said simply. Ideas that matter need walls. She looked at him for a long moment. Vaggie was in the doorway to the back hall, and Izuku had learned enough about her rhythms to know she'd been there long enough to hear the last exchange at least. He didn't look at her. He kept his attention on Charlie because Charlie was the one who needed to decide. Okay, Charlie said. Let me show you what we're actually doing. She showed him everything. 3 days of it, the intake process she designed, the counseling sessions she ran herself with the earnest thoroughness of someone who'd read every book on the subject and then developed her own approach on top of it, the way she tracked progress or tried to, the way the absence of a real metric for redemption was both the most frustrating thing about the project and the reason she couldn't let go of it. She showed him the systems and where they broke down, the residents who'd come and gone, the ones who'd stayed. She showed him the way hell worked against recovery structurally, the constant noise, the violence, the economy of cruelty that made kindness feel like a transaction rather than a baseline. She also showed him, without meaning to, what she was. Not her power, though her power was significant, the Morningstar bloodline was geological in its depth, and when she let pieces of it show during their conversations it came off her like heat off summer pavement. What she showed him was her will. The specific quality of a person who has decided to believe in something and has made that belief into a practice and the practice into a discipline. He recognized it. He'd spent his whole life doing exactly that. On the third day, she took him to the roof at what passed for dusk and pointed out the districts of Pentagram City and told him which ones were stable and which ones were fracturing and which ones had been deliberately destabilized by power players who benefited from chaos. And she did it with the comprehensive knowledge of someone who had grown up here and had never stopped paying attention even when everyone assumed the princess was just playing at philanthropy. You know this city, he said. It's my city. No defensiveness in it. Just fact. I know they think I'm naive. The overlords. Even some of the sinners who come through here. She sat on the roof edge, feet dangling, the city blazing below her. I know how it looks, princess with a dream, hotel full of projects, fighting against the way things are because she doesn't understand why they have to be that way. Is that not what you are? She looked at him sideways. I understand exactly why they are the way they are. I just disagree. A pause. There's a difference. Izuku sat beside her. Below them, hell went about its business, and the business was loud and burning and inexhaustible, and it pushed up against the hotel walls and couldn't quite get in, and the reason it couldn't quite get in was the woman sitting next to him. Tell me the difference, he said. So she did. She talked for an hour, sometimes in straight narrative, sometimes in the fragmented way people talk when they're thinking out loud about something they've never quite articulated, and what it came down to, stripped to the core, was this: she didn't believe hell was inevitable. She didn't believe the cruelty was structural in the way it was claimed to be. She believed, genuinely, foundationally, without apology, that the nature of a place could be changed if enough people decided to change it and had somewhere to start. He listened to all of it. Then he said, okay. She blinked. Okay. Okay, I understand what this is. And I know what it needs. He looked out over the city. It needs to be unfightable. Not just protected, unfightable. The kind of thing where attacking it is obviously, visibly a worse idea than leaving it alone. How do you make a rehabilitation hotel unfightable? He looked at her. You make what's inside it, he said, not worth the fight it would cost. She was quiet for a moment. Then, very carefully, and what's inside it now? He let the answer sit in the air between them, the fact of it, the green luminescence that hadn't dimmed since the night he arrived, the weight of one for all moving through him like a tide, and didn't say it, because he'd learned long enough ago that the most powerful statements were the ones you made without words. Charlie looked at him. Something shifted in her expression, something warm and wondering and slightly afraid of itself, the expression of someone who has just realized that the thing they hoped for might actually be real. She looked away before either of them had to name it. But she was smiling. He met Zestial's delegates on the 4th day and sent a message back, "I'll meet you in 5 days at the hotel. Bring your own chair." Midoriya. Vaggie intercepted him on the way back from delivering the message, which meant she'd been waiting, which meant she'd known he was going. "Zestial," she said. "Yeah. You know what he is. Ancient. Powerful. Believes chaos is load-bearing." Izuku looked at her. "I've read everything you and Charlie have told me about the overlords and filled in the rest from what Alastor said and what I can infer. Zestial is the most dangerous one because he's the most patient." Vaggie looked at him for a long moment. There was a question behind her eyes that she was deciding whether to ask, and he'd learned that when Vaggie took that beat before speaking it was because she was choosing between the careful version and the honest version. She went with honest. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "You could leave. Go find a corner of hell and just be there. With all that power you're carrying, nothing would bother you. You don't need the hotel, you don't need us, you don't need to walk into whatever Zestial is setting up." A pause. "So why?" He didn't answer immediately. He owed her a real answer, and real answers took a moment. "I was built to move toward things that need protecting," he said finally. "I spent my whole life doing it. Died doing it." He met her eye. "I'm not built differently now. And this," he gestured, meaning the hotel, meaning Charlie's project, meaning the whole warm ridiculous embattled thing of it. "This is worth protecting." Vaggie held his gaze. "That's it," she said. That's the reason. That's always been the reason." Another long look. Then she did something he hadn't seen her do in the 4 days he'd been here, she looked away first. Not because she was backing down. Because she was processing. "Fine," she said. It was a different fine from the ones she'd given him before, less "I'm grudgingly tolerating this" and more "I've updated my assessment and I'm not ready to say so out loud yet." He'd take it. The summons from 3 other overlords came within 24 hours of each other. Vox's arrived first, a video message, naturally, delivered through a screen that materialized on the hotel wall without being invited and that Alastor visibly hated from the first second. Vox's face filled the screen, television static and sharp blue light, and he looked at Izuku with the expression of a man who dealt in information and had just encountered a gap. "I'd like to meet," Vox said. "Privately. There are things in hell that you'd benefit from understanding, and I'm in the best position to provide them." "I'll think about it," Izuku said. The screen flickered, surprise, compressed into static. "That's not usually the answer people give me." "I'll think about it," Izuku said again. "Thanks for reaching out." The screen went off. Alastor's smile achieved a quality that suggested genuine pleasure. Carmilla Carmine's summons came differently, through a representative, polished and precise, who delivered a verbal message with the smoothness of long practice. Lady Carmine would be honored to meet the newcomer at his earliest convenience to discuss matters relating to the stability of Hell's current power structure, and she would appreciate discretion regarding the meeting's existence. "Tell Lady Carmine," Izuku said, "that I don't do private meetings before I've met someone publicly first. If she wants to come to the hotel, she's welcome." The representative's composure held, barely. "Lady Carmine does not typically visit the Hazbin Hotel. Then we'll meet somewhere neutral when she's ready. Her timeline." The representative left. Charlie, who had heard all of this from approximately 6 feet away while pretending to organize a shelf, turned around. "Carmilla Carmine sent a representative." "Yeah. She hasn't communicated with this hotel since, I know. And you just told her to come here on your terms. It's a reasonable position." He looked at her. "She can respect it or she can decide it's a problem. Either answer tells me something." Charlie stared at him. Then she burst out laughing, the real kind, unguarded, the kind that arrived before she could decide whether to perform it or suppress it. You're going to give me a heart attack, she said. I mean, not literally, I'm already dead, but emotionally, you're doing fine, he said. She shook her head, still smiling, and went back to her shelf. But the smile stayed. It was Angel who broke the pattern of the days. Not with a crisis, not at first. He came to find Izuku on the second floor landing at what might have been 2 in the morning, hell time, and he didn't have the careless performance going. He looked like himself, which in Angel's case meant the armor was down, and Angel without armor was someone different from the public-facing version. Tired. Younger looking. Something behind his eyes that had been watching the events of the past 4 days with a calculation that the performance usually hid. Hey, Angel said, dropping onto the landing step beside him without being invited, which Izuku appreciated because Performance Angel would have asked and the asking would have been a kind of performance. Hey, Izuku said. So you're really just, staying? Yeah. And doing the whole, Angel waved a hand. Power King of Hell thing. I don't know if I'd describe it that way yet. You sent a message back to Zestial Mox with your name on it, Angel said. In hell that's a declaration. You know that, right? Izuku looked at him. I know. Angel was quiet for a moment. Valentino is going to come for you, he said, and his voice was completely flat and that flatness was its own kind of information. When he figures out what you are and decides you're a threat to his setup. He's going to try and use me to get to you. Izuku turned to look at him fully. Angel didn't look back. He was looking at the wall, jaw set, and the performance was completely absent and what was underneath it was the specific kind of harden that comes from being hurt so many times in the same place that you've stopped expecting it to ever stop hurting. He's not going to be able to, Izuku said. You don't know, Angel. His voice was quiet but it didn't leave space for the deflection. He's not going to be able to use you. Not because of what I'll do to him, though that too, but because you're going to be okay. This place, Charlie's idea, it's real. You know that. You've been watching it the same way you watch everything, from behind the performance, and you know it's real. Angel was quiet. I'm not an idiot, Angel said finally. I know. And I'm not asking you to fight my battles. I know that too. A long silence. Then Angel let out a breath that had too much in it, tired and complicated and something that was trying to be relief but hadn't quite gotten there yet. You're weird, Angel said. Constantly, Izuku said. Angel stood up, brushed nothing off his outfit, and put the performance back on, not as complete as it usually was, but enough. Don't get deader, he said, and went back down the hall. Izuku sat with the quiet for a while. Then he went to his room and opened his notebook to a new page and wrote 3 words, Valentino. Soon. Ready. And under that, after a pause, Angel Dust. Not just performance. Real. Protect accordingly. He closed the notebook. Outside his window, hell shifted and murmured and went about the eternal business of being itself, and somewhere deep in its architecture, in the parts that predated language and motive, something that had been moving since the night he arrived moved a little further forward. 3 more days until Zestial. Izuku lay back on his bed, stared at the ceiling, and started running the scenarios. He wasn't scared. He'd never claimed to be invincible. He knew better than that, knew that invincibility was a story people told about strength that wasn't being challenged hard enough yet. But he was prepared. He was always prepared. Preparation was the discipline of someone who'd had no natural advantages and had learned that the only edge available to him was always knowing more, thinking harder, and being willing to move first. He thought about what Charlie had said on the roof. I understand exactly why they are the way they are. I just disagree. He turned that over in his mind. Disagreement. Not ignorance. Not naivete. Informed, deliberate disagreement with the structure of things. He'd spent his life doing exactly that. He thought, maybe that's why this place fits. Outside, the red sky of hell burned on, constant and total, the way it had burned since before the first human had fallen into it, and somewhere in its depth, something ancient had its attention fixed on a hotel on a city block in Pentagram City, where a dead man with a hero's soul was reading the shape of the dark and deciding what to do about it. The dark was not used to being read. It didn't know yet how to feel about it. But it was paying attention. And that, Izuku had learned a long time ago, was always how things started. Chapter 3, Fire and Steel. Carmilla Carmine didn't wait for neutral ground. She arrived at the hotel on the morning of the 5th day with no representative, no announcement, and no entourage beyond 2 guards who stayed at the door like they'd been told to and weren't happy about it. She walked through the front entrance like she owned the building, which was a specific kind of confidence, not aggressive, not performative, just the deep structural certainty of someone who had been the most powerful thing in every room they'd entered for so long that the certainty had become posture. She was tall. Dark-haired, pale-skinned, dressed in something red and black that had the quality of armor that had learned to look like fashion. Her eyes were the color of old blood and they moved across the hotel lobby in one sweep, cataloging, filing, dismissing the parts that didn't matter and locking onto the part that did. Izuku was standing at the front desk going over Charlie's operational notes when she walked in. He looked up. She looked at him. The lobby had 3 other people in it, Nifty cleaning, Angel on the couch with a magazine, Alastair materializing from the direction of the radio room with the timing of someone who had known she was coming before she arrived. All of them felt the temperature of the moment and made their various adjustments. Nifty cleaned faster, Angel lowered the magazine, Alastair's smile acquired an extra layer. Carmilla walked to the desk and stopped 2 feet from Izuku and looked at him the way a weaponsmith looks at a blade someone else made, looking for the flaws, assessing the quality, trying to decide if it was worth the price. "You turned down my private meeting," she said. "I don't do private meetings before public ones," he said. "I told your representative that." "I know what you told my representative." Her voice was even, controlled, the voice of someone who had decided not to be insulted and was maintaining that decision through will. "I want to understand why." "Because private meetings before public ones are a power play," he said. "They establish that one party sets the terms. I'm not interested in starting any relationship in this place from a position of having already conceded something." A pause. Her expression didn't change but something in it recalculated. "You've been here 5 days, she said. 6, now. And you're already talking about relationships in terms of concession and positioning. Aren't you?" Another pause. Longer this time. Then, not a smile, not exactly, but something around her mouth that was the architectural precursor to one. "Sit down," she said. "Both of us. I'll have someone bring tea, which will be terrible because this hotel doesn't have a proper kitchen setup, but the gesture will be appropriate." "Nifty makes excellent tea," Izuku said. "Does she?" Carmilla glanced at Nifty, who beamed with the ferocity of a small sun. "I'll make the good stuff," Nifty said, and disappeared into the kitchen at speed. They sat in the hotel sitting room, which Charlie had furnished with the same philosophy she applied to everything, aspirationally, with complete commitment to the vision even when the resources didn't quite match it. The chairs were good. The table was solid. The artwork on the walls was a collection that made no historical sense but had emotional coherence. Charlie herself appeared midway through the tea being poured, took in the scene, Carmilla Carmine sitting across from Izuku like 2 people having a business meeting at the edge of a volcano, and sat down beside Izuku with the smooth ease of someone who had decided to project confidence and was good enough at it that the projection was indistinguishable from the real thing. "Lady Carmine," Charlie said. "It's good to see you here." "Is it?" Carmilla said, not unkindly. "Yes." Firm. No qualification. Carmilla looked at her for a moment, then back at Izuku. "You've been here less than a week," she said, "and you've already responded to Zestial, declined Vox, and established yourself in Morningstar's project as something more than a guest. In hell that sequence reads as a declaration." "What kind?" "The kind that says you intend to matter." "I do intend to matter," Izuku said. She picked up her tea. Held it without drinking it, which was a thing people did when they wanted something to do with their hands while they thought. Then we need to discuss the consequences of that intention, she said. Because hell does not respond well to new things that intend to matter. The existing structure has very specific ways of handling them. I've heard. What's your position on those methods? She looked at him. I'm here, aren't I? He accepted that as the answer it was. In hell, proximity was a statement. You didn't put yourself in a room with something you intended to destroy, not if you were smart, not if you had other options. Carmilla had other options. She always had other options. Then tell me about Zestial, he said. The name landed in the room with weight. Charlie's hand tightened slightly on her teacup. Even Carmilla, who had control of her physical responses the way a concert pianist had control of their hands, took a half-beat before she answered. Zestial Mox, she said, has been in hell longer than this city has existed. Longer than most of what you see out that window. She nodded toward the sitting room's small window and the blazing city beyond it. He is not like other overlords. He doesn't want power the way Vox wants it, for visibility, for control, for the pleasure of having it. He wants it the way a river wants to flow downhill. It's simply what he does. What he is. And his position on the hotel? He hasn't stated one. But. She set down the tea. He believes order imposed on hell is a corruption. That the natural state of this place is chaos, and that anything which attempts to structure it, including, perhaps especially, a rehabilitation project run by the Morningstar heir, is an offense against what hell fundamentally is. She paused. He was patient while the extermination served his purposes. He'll be patient now, for a while. But patience in Zestial is not the same as acceptance. It's a long runway before an eventual collision. And you? Izuku asked. What do you believe hell fundamentally is? Carmilla was quiet for a moment. And in that moment something shifted, small, barely perceptible, but Izuku had spent his entire life reading the weight in people's silences. I believe hell is what the most powerful things in it decide it is, she said finally. Which is the most honest answer I can give you. Izuku nodded slowly. Then you're watching to see if I'm powerful enough to change the answer. She looked at him with that recalculating expression again, and this time whatever she found seemed to move a needle somewhere. Something like that, she said. She left an hour later with the same deliberate poise she'd arrived with, but the guards at the door, when she rejoined them, seemed to read something in her bearing that made them stand differently. Charlie closed the door and turned around and let out a breath she'd been managing for the past hour. That was Carmilla Carmine, she said. I know. She doesn't come here. She doesn't talk to anyone about Zestial, not directly. She's been in a Cold War maintenance position with him for decades. Charlie stopped herself. Reorganized. What did she want? To assess me. Izuku looked at the closed door. And to make sure I understood the shape of what's coming. And what is coming? Zestial, he said. Tomorrow. Charlie made a face that was trying to be brave and succeeding at about 60%. Right, she said. Right, okay. That's fine. We're fine. We're fine, he agreed. You're very calm about this. Panicking uses energy I might need later. She stared at him. Then laughed, short, sharp, slightly helpless. I'm putting that on the wall, she said. I'm making a plaque. Vaggie found him on the roof that night. She didn't announce herself. She came up the access stairs and sat down about 4 feet away from him, and they both looked at the city for a while. This had become, without either of them formally deciding it, their mode of conversation, proximity before language, the silence doing most of the work. How much do you know about exorcists? She asked eventually. He looked at her. In the city glow her face was lit from below, all sharp angles and the kind of beauty that didn't announce itself. Charlie told me the basics. Heaven's weapon. Annual extermination. You stopped the last one. Charlie stopped the last one. She stopped. I used to be one. He didn't react. He held the information and turned it over and looked at it for what it was, not what it implied. Used to be, he said. They took my wings when they found out I was helping Charlie. Her voice was flat in the way people make their voices flat when the feeling underneath is too large to carry without structural support. I fell. And now you're here. And now I'm here. A pause. I'm telling you because Zestial knows. He's known for a while. He's going to use it tomorrow as leverage, try to establish that the hotel is a heaven-adjacent operation, which would make it a political target rather than just an ideological one. Izuku turned to look at her fully. That's your concern? Being used as ammunition against the hotel? It's a real tactical vulnerability, Vaggie. His voice was quiet but it stopped her. I already know how he's going to try to frame it. It doesn't matter. She looked at him. It doesn't matter. What you are doesn't determine what this place is. Charlie's project stands on its own terms. If Zestial wants to make it political, he's going to need more than your history to do it. He held her gaze. I'm not going to let him. The words landed in the space between them and sat there, and Vaggie looked at him with the expression she got when she was updating her assessment, which happened more often lately, he'd noticed, and each update moved the needle further from wariness and closer to something she wasn't ready to name. You can't just decide things aren't problems because you don't want them to be, she said. But it was softer than her usual challenges. I'm not deciding it's not a problem. I'm deciding it's a problem I can handle. He turned back to the city. There's a difference. Another long silence. Then, very quietly, in a voice that was about as stripped of performance as he'd heard from her, why does this feel safe? He thought about that. Probably because nothing I've done since I got here has been for show. She was quiet. That's a weird thing to trust, she said finally. Yeah, he said. But you do. She didn't confirm it. She didn't deny it. She sat beside him on the roof of the hotel for another 20 minutes and they watched the city burn in its comfortable and eternal way, and when she left she went without the careful distance she usually maintained, and that absence was its own kind of answer. Zestial Mox arrived at noon. He came alone, which was a statement. In hell, overlords arriving alone to a meeting meant one of two things, total confidence or deliberate performance of total confidence. In Zestial's case, Izuku suspected, the distinction was academic. He was ancient in a way that wasn't about appearance, he looked like a man, technically, if you didn't examine the details too hard, tall and pale and composed, dressed in something dark and layered that suggested serious ceremony without quite being formal. His eyes were the deep, still color of water in a well that went down further than wells should go. He moved through the hotel door the way all genuinely ancient things moved, without hurry, without concern, with the particular gravity of something that has outlasted everything it's ever encountered and expects this to be no different. Charlie was in the lobby. Vaggie beside her. Alastair in the corner. Angel on the stairs, looking deceptively casual, which meant he was ready. Nifty had been gently redirected to the kitchen. Izuku stood in the center of the room. Zestial's eyes moved to him immediately. Not to Charlie, not to Alastair, to him, the way a compass moves to north, and that was information too. Mr. Midoriya, Zestial said. His voice was like deep water. You are precisely what I was told you were and entirely unlike what I expected. What were you told? A mortal soul carrying unprecedented spiritual power who arrived in hell under unusual circumstances and immediately began establishing position. He stopped about 6 feet away. What I didn't expect was how young you feel. I'm 22. In hell's terms, you are approximately a moment old. No malice in it. Just fact, stated with the serenity of something that had no need for malice. And yet here you are, meeting with overlords and mapping the power structure. I'm curious about the confidence. I was trained by the strongest hero who ever lived, Izuku said. Fought things that would have broken most people before I was 20. Died sealing a rift that was going to swallow a city. He looked at Zestial steadily. I'm not confident because I think nothing can hurt me. I'm confident because I've already met the worst things available and I'm still here. Zestial studied him. That's a hero's answer, he said. I was a hero. You're in hell now. I know where I am. A small silence. Then Zestial moved to one of the sitting room chairs, the one that Carmilla had used yesterday, which was either coincidence or deliberate, and with Zestial nothing was coincidence, and sat. He sat the way mountains sit. Settled, total, patient. Let me tell you what I believe, Zestial said, as a courtesy, since you've been direct with me. Go ahead. Hell requires disorder. Not cruelty for its own sake, I have no interest in cruelty. But the natural state of this realm is entropy, and entropy is not a disease. It is the condition of this place, the thing that gives it its particular character, its vitality. Order imposed here, any order, regardless of its source or its intentions, damages the fabric. He gestured, slightly. The Rehabilitation Project. The Princess's Hotel. A worthy idea, perhaps, in a world that functions on order. But this is not that world. And you, Mr. Midoriya, arriving with the power you carry and the intentions you carry, you are an order-imposing force of the highest magnitude. I want you to understand what that means for the place you've chosen to inhabit. Izuku let him finish. Then, you're not here to threaten me. No. You're here to convince me. Yes. The first hint of something like appreciation in those deep-water eyes. You're here to convince me that I shouldn't oppose the hotel, shouldn't move against Morningstar's project, shouldn't treat your presence as the disruption it technically is. You believe if you frame the argument well enough, if you make me understand the philosophy, I'll decide cooperation is more interesting than conflict. Zestial was quiet for a moment. That is a very sophisticated read of my intentions, he said. I've spent my whole life studying people who were trying to stop something I believed in, Izuku said. I know the difference between someone who wants to destroy and someone who wants to prevent. You're the second kind. Which means you're actually reachable. He leaned forward slightly. But you're wrong about entropy. It's not the condition of this place. It's the condition of this place without leadership. That's different. Zestial tilted his head. A fraction. The movement of something paying very close attention. Hell has had leadership, he said. It ended. Lilith left, Izuku said. Lucifer retreated. The throne went empty. And in the vacuum, the entropy you're describing got bad enough that heaven started sending exterminators just to manage it. He held Zestial's gaze. That's not entropy as natural condition. That's rot from abandonment. I'm not here to impose foreign order. I'm here because Hell's own deep structure chose me when I arrived. You felt that. You felt it the same way I did. The room was very quiet. Zestial looked at him for a long time. Long by any standard, enormous by Hell's, where the speed of violence made stillness itself a kind of communication. You are, Zestial said finally, the most dangerous thing to arrive in Hell in several centuries. I know. Not because of your power. I know. Because you actually believe what you're saying. Izuku held his gaze. Every word. Zestial rose. He moved toward the door with the same unhurried gravity he'd entered with, and at the door he stopped without turning around. I will not move against the hotel, he said. Not today. A pause. But I want you to understand something, Mr. Midoriya. The thing you felt when you arrived, the presence, the recognition, it does not confer safety. It does not confer permanence. It is a door being opened. What matters is what walks through. He finally looked back over his shoulder, and his eyes in that angle were very, very old. What you build here will be tested. Not by me. By what hell is when it decides you are a real enough thing to push against. I know, Izuku said. I'm counting on it. Zestial left. The room exhaled. Charlie sat down heavily in the nearest chair and pressed both hands to her face and breathed for a moment. Vaggie went to her immediately, hand on her shoulder, and that small automatic movement said everything about the two of them that words kept circling around. That went, Charlie started. Well, Izuku said. I was going to say terrifyingly well, but yeah. She dropped her hands. Her eyes were bright. He said he won't move against the hotel. For now. For now, she agreed, and the honesty in accepting that qualifier told him something. She wasn't naive. She'd never been naive. But that's more than we had yesterday. Considerably, Alastair said from the corner, and his smile had the quality of someone who had watched a chess match where the opening gambit defied every model he'd built for the board, and found this far more interesting than any outcome he'd predicted. Vaggie was looking at Izuku across the room with that steady gaze that she'd been recalibrating all week. You told him Hell's own structure chose you, she said. Is that true, or was that the negotiation talking? It's true, he said. I felt it when I arrived. Something fundamental recognized the power I was carrying and made room. Made room for what? He looked at her. I don't know the full shape of it yet. But I know it's real. She held his gaze for a long moment. Then, with the particular deliberateness of someone choosing to extend something rather than withhold it, then figure it out fast, she said. Because Zestial being patient doesn't mean everyone is. As if on cue, Izuku's awareness of the city, that sense he'd been developing, the feel of Hell's spiritual architecture the way a sailor feels weather, spiked. Something was happening 2 blocks north. He was out the door before anyone asked. He heard Vaggie behind him, not far behind. She moved fast and she'd been watching for exactly this kind of sudden departure, and he let her come because trying to stop Vaggie was a project with a poor return on investment. 2 blocks north turned out to be an alley that had been a street until someone had decided to use a building as a weapon. The building was a mid-size commercial structure, or had been, and it was currently in the process of being demolished by something that occupied the space between a demon and a force of nature, Valentino, unmistakable even from a distance, enormous and moth-winged and incandescently furious, tearing through everything around him with the chaotic energy of someone who decided that destruction was the appropriate response to feeling threatened. The people on the street were scattering. Several weren't fast enough. And there, caught against a wall with 2 other demons between her and the nearest exit, was a woman Izuku didn't recognize, small, pink-haired, wearing the expression of someone who had walked into the wrong situation at the worst possible time and was currently running the math on her options and finding them limited. He didn't calculate. He was already moving. He crossed the distance between the alley entrance and the wall and the time it took the debris to fall from Valentino's last impact, and the green lightning of one for all rose from his feet and washed outward like a wave, and the 2 demons between the woman and the exit hit the wall and slid down it and decided they had somewhere else to be. He turned to look at Valentino. Valentino looked back at him. The moth overlord was massive up close, wings spread, a presence that pushed at the air around it, eyes red and furious and currently trying to decide what it was looking at. He had the energy of someone who'd been building toward a scene all morning, who'd needed to break something, who'd come here with a specific target in mind and was annoyed to find an obstacle. Get out of the way, Valentino said. The voice was enormous. The authority in it was real. This was a being who was used to people getting out of the way. Izuku stood in front of the pink-haired woman and looked at Valentino. Just looked. One for all wasn't raised. It wasn't performance. He was standing still, and he was looking, and what was in that look was the absolute uncomplicated refusal of someone who had decided this was where he stood. Valentino's wings spread further. Do you know who I am? Yes, Izuku said. Then move. No. The word landed in the street like a dropped stone. Valentino stared at him. Then his expression shifted from furious to the particular dangerous quality of someone who decided they needed to demonstrate a point. He swung. Izuku moved into it, not away from it, into it, the same instinct that had driven him at the rift, the same forward momentum, and caught the strike with both hands and redirected, using the force rather than fighting it, and Valentino stumbled forward and his enormous wings beat for balance and the air pressure was significant but Izuku's feet didn't move. He let the Overlord regain his footing. Then he said, still in the same quiet voice, "Don't." Valentino was breathing hard. His eyes had changed, the furious certainty was still there but something else had entered it. Something that lived underneath the fury in beings that had learned to be afraid of things and had decided anger was a better response. "What are you?" Valentino said. "Something new," Izuku said. "Something you haven't dealt with before. And I need you to understand that what you do in this city, what you've been doing, is going to stop." "On whose authority?" Izuku looked at him. "Mine." Vaggie arrived at the alley entrance at that exact moment, weapon ready, and assessed the scene in 1 second, Valentino up, Izuku standing, the woman behind Izuku unhurt, and held her position because she could read that the immediate crisis had already peaked. Valentino looked at Izuku for a long moment. Then he looked at Vaggie. Then back at Izuku. "You have no idea what you're starting," he said. "I have a very good idea," Izuku said. "I've been ending things my whole life. You learn to see how they start." Valentino left. Not retreating, Valentino didn't retreat, not in his own self-conception, but withdrawing. The difference was philosophical and Izuku let him have it because the outcome was the same. The street was wrecked and smoking and the city noise was already starting to fill the silence back in the way hell's noise always did. Izuku turned to the woman he'd been shielding. Up close she was familiar in a way he hadn't expected, the energy around her was different from the other demons he'd met, cleaner somehow, which was the wrong word but the closest one. "Are you hurt?" he asked. "No," she said. She was looking at him with wide eyes. You told Valentino no. He was going to hurt people. People tell him no and die," she said. "You told him no and he left." Izuku glanced back at the alley, at the general direction Valentino had gone. "He'll reconsider his position over the next few days and come to a conclusion he can live with," he said. "Or he won't, and we'll have this conversation again with more permanence." The woman stared at him. Then she started laughing, surprised, slightly hysterical, the laugh of someone who has been frightened and is processing it by finding the absurdity. "I'm Mimsy," she said. I know Charlie. Tell her I said hi." She paused. "And thank you. Genuinely." He nodded. She left quickly, which was the smart move. Vaggie came up beside him and looked at the wreckage of the street. "Valentino," she said flatly. "He came here because of me," Izuku said. He felt threatened. This was meant to be a message. "And what's your message back?" He looked at the alley. At the direction Valentino had gone. At the city beyond it, enormous and burning and full of people who had been hurt or used or spent by the things that ran this place. "Same one I've always sent," he said. "I'm here, I'm not going anywhere, and I'm not afraid of you." Vaggie was quiet. "You didn't even power up all the way," she said. "Against an overlord." "I didn't need to." She shook her head. Not in disbelief, she'd watched the whole thing, she'd seen what happened. "In something more complicated. You know they're going to keep coming," she said. "They're all going to need to test what you are." "I know. And every time you don't break, it makes you harder to ignore. That's the point." She looked at him sideways, and the expression on her face was one he'd seen building for days now, the accumulated weight of watching someone be consistently, genuinely themselves in a place where performance was the standard currency. She didn't name it. She turned back toward the hotel and started walking. But she fell into step beside him instead of ahead of him, which was new. He didn't point it out. He just walked. Behind them, hell went on doing what it always did, burning, churning, filling every silence back up, but around the hotel, in the 2 blocks of streets that had slowly started to orient themselves toward it the way compass needles orient toward north, something was settling. Not peace. That was too strong a word for hell. But gravity. A center. And from the oldest parts of hell's architecture, from the deep places that predated even Zestial, something was watching that center form, watching the green light that moved through it like a heartbeat, and doing the arithmetic of what it meant. Somewhere in those old deep places, something reached a conclusion. And the crown that had been held just above Izuku's head since the moment he arrived moved, almost imperceptibly, lower. Chapter 4, What Hell Remembers. 3 days after Valentino left the alley, the dreams started. Not nightmares, Izuku had those catalogued and accounted for, had been living with them since he was old enough to understand that the world contained things that could break you if you let them. These were different. These were memories that weren't his. He'd wake at whatever passed for 3 in the morning in hell and sit with the residue of them, vast spaces, deep red, the feeling of something enormous and long-loved being gone, not destroyed but simply absent, the specific grief of a room where someone used to be. He didn't know the spaces. He didn't know the feeling from his own life. But One for All carried its predecessors the way a river carries the shape of every rock it's passed over, and he was beginning to understand that the power remembered things he'd never experienced. Hell remembered Lilith. Not as a story. As a wound. He wrote about it in his notebook on the 4th morning, sitting at the small desk in his room with the city churning outside and the pen moving faster than he was consciously directing it, and what came out was less analysis and more archaeology. The shape of an absence. A queen who had left and a kingdom that had been bleeding quietly ever since, and all the structures that had grown up in the vacuum, overlords, power plays, the whole brittle architecture of hell's current arrangement, were scar tissue over a wound that hadn't closed. He put down the pen and looked at what he'd written. Then he went downstairs and found Charlie in the kitchen at what was apparently her standard operating hour, early, when the hotel was quiet, with a mug of something and a stack of papers she was working through with the focused energy of someone who'd been at it for a while. She looked up when he came in. Took in his expression. Bad night? Informative night, he said, and poured himself coffee and sat across from her. Tell me about your mother. Charlie went still. Not the processing kind of still, the other kind, the kind that happened when a question arrived with more weight than expected and the weight landed somewhere already tender. Why? She asked. Because hell is grieving her, he said simply. I can feel it in the place's architecture. Every system here, every power structure, everything that exists in the space between what this realm is and what it was, it's all compensating for her absence. And I need to understand why she left. Charlie looked at her mug. Her hands were wrapped around it and her thumbs were moving in the small absent gesture of someone thinking through something they don't enjoy thinking about. She made a deal, Charlie said. With heaven. The specifics, I don't know all of them. She left when it's complicated. She paused. She believed in what I'm doing here. The hotel. The idea of redemption. She believed in it before I did, actually. She was the one who first told me it was possible. And then she left. And then she left. Her voice was even but the evenness was constructed. And Dad, my father retreated into his work and hell fell apart at the seams, and here we are. Izuku looked at her. She's coming back. Charlie's eyes came up. What? I don't know when. But the thing I felt when I arrived, the deep structure of this place, it's been waiting. Not just for something to fill the vacancy, but specifically. It's been waiting for something that fits the shape of what's missing. He paused. And that shape is more complicated than just a throne. Charlie was looking at him with that expression, intelligence and something more personal fighting for space on her face. You've been here 8 days, she said. And you can feel my mother in the architecture of hell. One for All carries a lot of history, he said. And apparently hell's deep memory is very loud if you know how to listen. She was quiet for a moment. Then, carefully, are you scared of her? Of what it'll mean when she comes back? He thought about that honestly. About the presence he'd felt his first night, the vast, ancient, deeply inconvenienced thing that had gotten out of his way. About Zestchul's words, what you build here will be tested. About the crown that he could feel, closer now, the weight of it more defined. No, he said. She's, Izuku, she's Lilith. The first woman, I know who she is. And you're not scared. I'm interested, he said. There's a difference. Charlie stared at him. Then, for the second time since he'd met her, she laughed that unguarded laugh, the one that surprised her, and shook her head. You are the strangest person I have ever met, she said. And I grew up in hell. He smiled. I'll take that. The hit came on the 9th day. Not from Zestchul. Not from Valentino, who had gone quiet in the way that suggested not capitulation but recalculation. Not from any of the overlords who'd been circling. It came from something smaller and more precise, which was how it worked. You watched for the large obvious threats and someone sent something thin and targeted through the gap. Izuku was in the hotel's main hall running through the physical discipline he'd kept since he was a teenager, movement patterns, force calibration, the daily practice of keeping one for all from getting ahead of him even though in hell that battle had fundamentally changed character, when he felt the shift. It was subtle. A change in the texture of the hotel's atmosphere, the way a room changes when someone opens a window you didn't know was there. Something entering the building that wasn't through the front door and wasn't through any physical point of entry he could identify. He stopped moving. Angel Dust came down the stairs at that exact moment, fourth cup of something in hand, and stopped on the landing with his expression doing something complicated. You feel that? Angel said. Yeah. That's a binding, Angel said, and his voice had changed character entirely, all the performance gone, the voice of someone who actually knew what they were talking about. Someone laid a binding on this building. A structural one, not a curse, nothing aggressive. It's a limitation. It's cutting off the hotel's connection to the city grid. Izuku looked up at the ceiling, feeling the edges of it. Angel was right, it was precise, surgical, the work of someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Not an attack. Something worse, an isolation. Cut the hotel off from hell's power infrastructure and everything that depended on it became fragile. Charlie's project ran on her belief and her effort and her power, yes, but it ran in a city, and cities ran on grids. Vox, Izuku said. Angel's jaw tightened. Yeah. He couldn't come at me directly after Valentino's failure, so he went for the building. Izuku thought for a moment. He's smart. This is the move of someone who understood that attacking me is a demonstration I win and he loses. So he attacked the idea instead. Can you, Angel started. I need Alastair, Izuku said. And Charlie. Now. They found the binding's anchor point within 20 minutes, Alastair, who had a relationship with Hell's infrastructure that predated most of what was currently built on it, traced it to a sigil that had been pressed into the foundation of the hotel. Not physically, not something you could see with normal sight. A spiritual mark, layered in under the building's base frequency with the patience and precision of someone who'd had time to plan it. Charlie was on her knees looking at the impression of it, which Alastair had made visible through means that involved radio static and something that smelled like old broadcast signals. Her expression was controlled, but her hands on the floor were pressed flat in the way that someone presses their hands flat when they're managing something physical. It's been here for days, she said. Her voice was quiet. He put it here before he even sent the representative. While I was meeting with Zestchul, Izuku said. He used the distraction. He used me, she said, and the quiet in her voice was the kind that had real weight underneath it. He knew I'd be focused on Zestchul's visit, he knew the hotel would be, we were all paying attention to the wrong thing. Izuku crouched beside her. Charlie. She looked at him. This isn't your failure, he said. This is Vox being exactly as smart as we knew he was. You can be angry about it, but not at yourself. She held his gaze for a moment. The controlled expression stayed, but something behind it settled, the way a flame settles when the wind changes direction. I'm not angry, she said. I'm tired of this place treating everything I build like it's a target. I know. I'm tired of, every time we make something good, something real, someone decides to come at it because it makes them feel threatened or it doesn't fit their model of what hell should be or, Charlie. He put a hand on her shoulder. We're going to fix this. Then we're going to make it so Vox can't try this again. Both of those things are happening. He held her gaze. I need you to trust that. She looked at him. Looked at his hand on her shoulder. Looked back at his face. I trust that, she said. Quietly, but with the particular quality of a truth stated rather than a performance given. He stood. Turned to Alastair. Can you help me break the anchor? Alastair considered the sigil with the expression of a man examining a competitor's work and finding it professionally interesting if morally irritating. I can help you dismantle it, he said. But breaking Vox's work requires broadcasting on a frequency that he monitors. He'll know immediately. Good, Izuku said. I want him to know. Alastair's smile acquired the specific quality it got when Izuku did something that matched Alastair's aesthetic preferences. Then let's make some noise. What happened when Izuku dismantled the binding was not subtle. He and Alastair worked at it together, Alastair providing the architectural knowledge, the specific frequencies and angles of Hell's deep infrastructure, and Izuku providing the force. Not raw force, the focused, compressed force of one for all applied with the precision he'd spent years developing, the same precision that had let him use 3% and then 5% and then more without destroying himself. He found the anchor point's frequency and he pushed against it with one for all calibrated to exactly the right resonance, and the binding cracked, and then it shattered, and the shockwave of it went out through Hell's spiritual infrastructure like a stone dropped in still water. The hotel came back online. The warmth of it was immediate, the lights brightened slightly, the quality of the air changed, something relaxed in the building's fundamental character the way a person relaxes when they put down weight they'd stopped noticing they were carrying. But the shockwave didn't stop at the hotel. It traveled through the grid, outward, and it carried a signature, one for all, compressed, undeniable, the spiritual equivalent of a name shouted in a silent room. Every overlord in Pentagram City felt it. Every demon with sensitivity to Hell's infrastructure felt it. Every monitoring system Vox had in place, which were numerous and sophisticated, felt it. Izuku stood in the hotel's foundation level and let it go and didn't pull it back. Point made. Vox's response came 40 minutes later. Not a binding this time. Not a sigil. He came himself, which told you everything. Vox was a man who valued his image above most things, and coming himself meant the situation had breached whatever threshold triggered his vanity. You only showed up in person when the alternative was looking like you'd been outmaneuvered and you couldn't afford the optics. He stood in the hotel doorway, didn't come in, stayed in the frame, which was its own statement, and his screen face was bright and blue and the static in it was the kind that meant controlled anger. You broke my architecture, he said. You put your architecture in someone else's house, Izuku said, from the center of the lobby where he'd been waiting. I removed it. That building is in my city. This city belongs to Hell, Izuku said. And this hotel belongs to Charlie Morningstar. Your name isn't attached to either of those things. He looked at Vox steadily. You should leave. Vox's screen face flickered. You're in my territory, I'm not in your territory. I'm in Hell, which is a larger category than your portfolio. Izuku took one step forward. Just one. You put a precision binding in this building while I was in a meeting because you calculated that a direct confrontation was a loss for you. You were right about that. But the move you made instead was still a loss. You just got to find out slower. The static in Vox's face intensified. Behind Izuku, he was aware of Vaggie in the corridor, hand on her weapon but not raising it because she'd read the same thing Izuku had read. Vox wasn't here to fight. He was here to reassert position through presence, and presence was going to fail him. You don't understand what you're dealing with, Vox said. The systems I have in this city, the infrastructure, the information network, I understand it exactly, Izuku said. You're the most well-informed overlord in hell. You know everything that happens here. That's real power and I'm not dismissing it. He held Vox's gaze. But information without the will to act on it decisively is a library. I've met your decisive action. I've seen what it looks like when you move. He tilted his head slightly. I broke your binding in 40 minutes. The silence in the lobby was complete. Vox stood in the doorway. Izuku didn't move. This isn't over, Vox said. I know, Izuku said. When you're ready to have a real conversation about how this city is going to function going forward, I'm here. Until then, he gestured toward the door, politely, with the absolutely level courtesy of someone who doesn't need to be rude to communicate exactly what they mean. Vox left. The door closed. Vaggie exhaled from the corridor. You just told Vox to come back when he's ready to cooperate. I gave him a door, Izuku said. Whether he uses it is his choice. Most people don't give Vox doors. They either submit or they go to war. I've noticed that pattern. He turned around. It's a bad pattern. Binary options tend to produce binary outcomes and neither of them is what I'm trying to build. She was looking at him with that steady expression, the one that had stopped being purely evaluative several days ago and had become something with more texture to it. What are you trying to build? She asked. It wasn't rhetorical. It was a genuine question, asked with genuine attention. He thought about it. Not the political answer, not the strategic one. The real one. Something that doesn't have to apologize for existing, he said. Here, in this place. Charlie's project, the hotel, the idea of it, it shouldn't have to constantly defend its right to be. And right now it does, because there's nothing big enough around it to make attacking it look like the bad idea it is. He looked at her. I'm trying to be that thing. Vaggie was quiet. You know what that makes you, she said. Tell me. It makes you the thing that either holds or breaks, she said. There's no middle ground. If you hold, everything behind you holds with you. If you don't, she left it there. I know, he said. I've been that thing before. I'm used to it. She looked at him for a long moment. Does that get easier? Carrying that? He thought of Toshinori. Of the weight of a symbol. Of what it costs to be the thing other people lean against. No, he said honestly. But you stop needing it to be easy. Something in her face, subtle, the kind of shift that happened in small muscles around the eyes, did the thing it had been doing for days now, that incremental movement towards something she wasn't naming. She nodded once. Looked away. I'm going to check the building's perimeter, she said. Make sure there aren't other anchor points. I'll come with you, he said. She didn't say yes or no. She just started moving toward the back of the hotel, and he followed, and that was its own kind of answer. They found 2 more sigils, smaller, older, placed by someone other than Vox, which raised different questions, in the hotel's east wall and beneath the staircase. Vaggie identified them through a method that involved her weapon held flat, the blade function switched off, using it as a detection instrument, which told him things about her training that the ex-exorcist designation hadn't fully communicated. You were good at it, he said, while she traced the second sigil's edges. The exorcist work. You weren't just a soldier. She didn't look up from what she was doing. Does it matter? I'm trying to understand what you can do, he said. Not for leverage. Because you and I keep ending up in situations together and I want to know how to fight alongside you properly. She was quiet for a moment. Her blade moved along the wall with careful precision. I was a specialist, she said. Precision elimination. They sent me into specific targets, not mass extermination. A pause. I had doubts about the extermination before I met Charlie. The way we were trained to see the damned, as problems to manage rather than, she stopped. It doesn't matter now. It matters, he said. It's why you fight the way you fight. Everything in your history matters to understanding you. She finally looked at him. Why do you want to understand me? The question was direct, clear, with no deflection in it. She'd stopped bothering with deflection somewhere around the 5th or 6th day, and he'd noticed and not pointed it out because naming it would have pushed her back behind the wall. Because you're worth understanding, he said simply. The look she gave him was the kind of look that happened when someone said something genuine in a place that had trained everyone to perform or deflect, and the genuineness arrived before the defenses could process it. She looked at him for a full beat too long and then looked back at the wall. Second sigil's older, she said, voice completely level. Not Vox. Different methodology. This one's been here a while. He let the subject change stand. Filed the moment away. Can you break it? With your help, yes. They broke it together, her providing the technical precision, him providing the force, and it came apart cleanly. The hotel settled further, something in its atmosphere going another degree warmer. Standing in the basement hallway, in the echo of the broken sigil, Vaggie looked at her weapon and then at him. The way you fight, she said. You move into things. Every time. You don't block or dodge unless you're specifically redirecting, you close the distance. Always have. That's not a power thing. That's a, she searched for the word. Mindset, he said. My teacher used to say that the most dangerous thing in any fight isn't the strongest technique. It's conviction. If you believe the distance needs to close, it closes. She thought about that. That works in the fights I've watched you have, she said, because your conviction is completely real. You're not performing it. No. Most people perform conviction, she said. Even good fighters. They psych themselves up, they do the thing where they stand like they mean it. The space between genuine and performed is detectable if you know what to look for. And with me? She met his gaze. There's no space, she said. What you show is what's there. She stopped. I've never encountered that before. Not in this context. Not in someone who fights. Does it bother you? It terrifies me, she said, with the specific directness of someone who has decided to just say the thing. Not in a threat way. In the way that things you can actually trust are terrifying when you're not used to them. He held her gaze. Get used to it, he said quietly. I'm not going anywhere. She looked at him. He could see the exact moment she stopped calculating the statement for hidden meaning and accepted it at face value, and the accepting of it did something visible to her expression, not softened exactly, more like the difference between a fist and an open hand. She looked away first. Moved toward the stairs. Come on, she said. Charlie's going to be doing the worried pacing thing if we're down here much longer. He followed. Charlie was not pacing. She was at the front desk with her papers and her mug and a second mug that she'd clearly prepared and been waiting to hand to someone, and when Izuku and Vaggie came back upstairs she looked at both of them, at the quality of the air between them, and in the way of someone who paid attention to everything and never said so, noted it and filed it. She handed Izuku the mug. Found 2 more, he said. I know. I felt them break. She wrapped both hands around her own mug. Izuku. Yeah. This is going to keep happening. She said it evenly, not as complaint, not as warning. Fact, accepted and offered. Not just Vox. Not just Valentino. Everything we talked about in terms of the overlords, in terms of the way hell responds to things that, everything Zestial said about being tested. That's real. That's going to be real every day. I know. And I need to know, she stopped. Restarted. I need to know that you're here. Not just present. Not just powerful. That this, she gestured, meaning the hotel, meaning all of it. That this is real to you. That you're not going to, Charlie. He set down the mug and looked at her. I chose this. I'm not here because I fell here and it was the nearest soft landing. I felt the shape of this place, understood what it needed, met you and Vaggie and everyone in this building, and I chose to be here. Actively. Every day since. He held her gaze. This is real to me. All of it. She looked at him for a long moment. Something in her eyes, that warmth she carried like a constant low light, intensified briefly, the way a flame does when air gets to it. She blinked it back to its normal level. Okay, she said. Okay, good. She picked up her papers. Then I need to tell you something and I need you not to make a face about it. I can try. My father wants to meet you. He made a face. I said don't make a face. I said I'd try. She laughed despite herself. Dad has been paying attention, in his way, and he's heard enough from me that he wants to come here, to the hotel, and meet you. And I know Dad is complicated, and the whole Lucifer thing is a lot, and, Charlie. He picked up the mug again. It's fine. Whenever he's ready. She looked at him. You're really not scared of anything, are you? He thought about that honestly, the real honest version, the one he didn't usually give. I'm scared of failing people who trusted me, he said. I'm scared of getting something wrong when it costs someone else. I've always been scared of that. He looked at her. But anything that wants to fight me, anything that wants to test what I am, anything that's coming at us from outside, no. That I'm not scared of. Charlie was quiet. Her expression had moved into the territory it sometimes reached when they talked, past the optimism and the deliberate brightness into something quieter and more genuine, the face of someone dropping the performance not because they had to but because they'd found someone safe enough to drop it with. I think, she said carefully, that you might be exactly what this place needs. He looked at her. The hotel was quiet around them, the city noise outside its constant presence, the warmth of the dismantled sigil's absence making the air cleaner. We'll see, he said. I already see, she said, and the simplicity of it, no performance, no hoping, landed between them like a thing placed rather than thrown. She went back to her papers. He stood with his coffee and looked out the hotel window at hell's churning permanent fire and thought about the shape of things, what was built, what was coming, what the deep architecture of this place had been trying to reach toward since he arrived. He thought about the crown. The weight of it now was less theoretical. Less like something approaching and more like something already present, settled at a level just below the surface of everything he did here. Each day it had been more itself, more defined, more certain in its dimensions. He wasn't going to reach for it. He wasn't going to perform indifference about it either. He was going to do what he'd always done, move forward, protect what mattered, refuse the fear, and let the shape of things reveal itself at its own pace. Behind him, Vaggie came into the front hall from the corridor, said something quiet to Charlie, got a quiet answer back. The small sounds of the hotel going about its evening. Nifty somewhere in the kitchen. Angel upstairs, probably, with his complicated quiet. It felt like something. He hadn't had a something to feel like anything since Toshinori's face at the rift. He held it carefully. Opened his notebook. Wrote, Day 9. Vox made his move. We answered. 2 unknown sigils, older, different origin. Follow up. He paused. This place is starting to feel like mine. Not sure when that happened. He closed the notebook. Finished the coffee. Outside, hell continued its endless roar, and in the deep structure beneath it, in the ancient places that remembered everything, something that had been still for a very long time shifted. Prepared. The testing, as Zestial had promised, was not over. It was barely beginning. But in the Hazbin Hotel on a street in Pentagram City, a light burned that hadn't been there 10 days ago, and it was green, and it was steady, and it did not flicker. Chapter 5, The Queen Who Was Missing. She arrived without announcement, which was the most powerful thing she could have done. No ripple in Hell's infrastructure. No advance presence, no delegation, no slow building awareness of something approaching the way Zestial had moved or the way even Vox's petty sabotage had announced itself through the grid. One moment the hotel was operating at its standard morning rhythm, Nifty cleaning, Angel complaining about the coffee, Charlie going through her intake papers with the focused energy of someone who treated Tuesday like it owed her something, and the next moment the air in the lobby changed. Not pressure. Not threat. Something older than both. Izuku felt it from the third-floor landing where he'd been reading through 3 weeks of notes, and he was moving before he'd consciously processed what he was feeling. He came down the stairs into a lobby that had gone completely still, Nifty frozen mid-sweep, Angel sitting up straight with all 4 hands visible and the performance entirely absent from his face, Charlie standing in the center of the room with her papers dropped to the floor and her hands at her sides and an expression that Izuku had never seen on her before. At the hotel door stood a woman. Tall. Dark-haired, the deep rich dark of something expensive and permanent, worn long and undecorated in a way that suggested it had never needed decoration. She was dressed simply, which on her, Izuku understood immediately, was its own statement, the simplicity of someone who hadn't needed to try in so long that effort would have been the affectation. Her eyes were the color of old amber, warm and deep and currently fixed on Charlie with an expression that Izuku could only describe as the full weight of someone who had been carrying the absence of a person for a very long time and had just put it down. Lilith. He knew her the way you know a word you've never read but have always understood, through the architecture of the place she'd left, through the shape of everything that had grown in her absence, through the quality of the air that seemed to rearrange itself around her arrival the way furniture rearranges a room. Charlie, Lilith said. Her voice was what it was. Low, warm, the kind of voice that had been speaking with authority for so long that authority was no longer something it performed. Charlie made a sound. Not a word, something before words, something that happened in the chest before language gets there, and crossed the lobby in 3 steps and Lilith caught her. Izuku stopped at the foot of the stairs. He watched. He was good at watching, had always been good at it, the particular attention that didn't intrude, that let what was happening be what it was without inserting itself. Charlie was saying something against her mother's shoulder, words too quiet to carry, and Lilith was holding her with the complete steadiness of someone who had been rehearsing this in their mind for long enough that the actual moment was simply the truth of the rehearsal. Angel Dust quietly picked up his magazine and looked at it without reading it. Nifty resumed cleaning at half speed with the determined focus of someone pretending not to witness something. After a long moment, Charlie pulled back. Her eyes were bright. She was doing the thing where she was deciding whether to cry and choosing not to because there were more immediate things to handle, and the decision was visibly difficult. You're here, she said. You're actually here. I'm here, Lilith said. Her eyes moved over Charlie, cataloging, the specific thorough attention of a parent looking for damage, and then moved to the hotel around her, taking in the space, the decor, the careful warmth of what Charlie had built. Something in Lilith's expression, very briefly, was proud. Then her eyes moved to Izuku. And the quality of her attention changed entirely. It wasn't hostility. He would have preferred hostility. Hostility was legible, had a structure, could be navigated. What Lilith gave him was something more complex and in some ways more dangerous, complete, comprehensive, utterly penetrating attention. The attention of someone who had lived for longer than most civilizations and had spent that time developing the ability to read things that didn't want to be read. She looked at him the way you look at something you've heard described many times and are now seeing for the first time and finding that the description was simultaneously accurate and entirely inadequate. Izuku Midoriya, she said. Yes, he said. You've been making noise. Some. Vox filed a formal grievance with the Outer Circle Council, she said. Zestial has been uncharacteristically quiet for 2 weeks. Valentino hasn't moved against anyone in the same period. The spiritual architecture of this district has reorganized around your hotel with a coherence it hasn't had since, she stopped. Since before I left. I know, he said. She studied him. You don't seem surprised to see me. I knew you were coming, he said. Not when. But the shape of this place has been waiting for you. I could feel the direction of it. Something shifted in Lilith's amber eyes. You can read Hell's architecture. One for all has memory, he said. And Hell has a long one. Once I learned how to listen, the rest was just attention. She was quiet for a moment. Around them, the lobby held its collective breath. Walk with me, Lilith said. Not a request. He walked. She took him through the hotel's front door and into the street outside, and then she kept walking, and he kept pace, and the city of Pentagram City did what cities do when something genuinely powerful moves through them, it got out of the way without being asked. Demons that would have crowded any other pedestrians found suddenly pressing reasons to be on the other side of the street. The ambient noise dropped half a register. They walked for 2 blocks before she spoke. Tell me how you got here, she said. He told her. All of it, the rift, the decision, the feeling of one for all following him through death like a loyal current, the arrival and the presence that had gotten out of his way, the hotel and Charlie and the weeks that followed. He told it plainly, without embellishment, the way he always told things, as precisely as possible, because precision was respect for the person listening. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she said, One for all followed you through death. Yes. That shouldn't be possible. I know. The power should have dissipated. The soul retains its character but not its quirk, that's fundamental metaphysics. The body is the channel and the body died. Apparently one for all disagrees, he said. It's been with me since before I was born to it. 20-something years of that kind of sustained relationship, I think it stopped being just a quirk at some point. It became part of what I am. She looked at him sideways. You're saying it fused with your soul. I'm saying that's what it feels like. She processed this in silence for half a block. And here, without physical limits, it's full, he said. Everything it was building toward. All of it, accessible, with precision and without cost. He paused. It's a significant change from how it worked when I was alive. I imagine, she said drily, and there was something in the dryness that was the first glimpse of her actual personality beneath the authority, a wit, dry and watchful, the humor of someone who'd seen enough of everything to find the universe consistently ironic. They turned a corner and found themselves on a street that backed against one of Pentagram City's less destroyed areas, a park, of sorts, in the way that Hell had parks, which meant open space with red-lit sky visible above it and the ambient roar of the city a half-register quieter. Lilith stopped. I need to understand what your intentions are, she said. In this place. With my daughter. He looked at her. Not deflecting from the second part of that sentence. With the hotel, he said, my intentions are what they've been since I got here, protect it, support what Charlie is building, remove obstacles with as little damage as possible and as much damage as necessary. And with Charlie. Your daughter, he said, is one of the most genuinely remarkable people I've ever met. Her conviction is real. Her intelligence is real. What she's building matters and she knows it and she does it anyway, every day, in a place that fights her at every turn. He held Lilith's gaze. My feelings about her are honest. What they become, that's not something I'm going to make promises about in the abstract. But nothing I feel toward her is anything but genuine. Lilith looked at him for a long moment. You didn't perform that, she said. I don't perform things. Everyone performs things. Not me, he said. I learned young that I wasn't good enough at it to bother. Honesty was more efficient. She studied him. And the other women in this building, she said, and the amber eyes were level and watching everything. Vaggie. He met her gaze. What about her? You've been changing her, Lilith said. I could feel it in the hotel when I walked in, the way she's positioned in the space, the way she held herself when she was watching the doorway when I arrived, waiting for threat assessment instead of assuming threat. That's a different Vaggie from the one Charlie has described to me. I haven't changed her, he said. I've given her something to trust. She changed herself. Lilith was quiet. That's a careful answer, she said. It's an accurate one. Another silence. A longer one. The city moved around them, distant, and in the sky above the open space the red of hell's permanent twilight did its characteristic thing of seeming deeper and richer away from the city's immediate glare. I left, Lilith said abruptly. He didn't say anything. He let the statement be what it was. I made a deal that I believed was necessary and I left my daughter and my husband and this entire place and I believed, she stopped. I believed it was the right decision. That the alternative was worse. That the cost was payable. Her voice was completely even, the evenness of someone who had been over this terrain so many times that the emotion had been worn smooth, like a stone in a river. I came back because something happened here that I could feel from where I was. Me, he said. You, she confirmed. The arrival of something that matched the vacancy. Not replaced it, matched it. The way a key matches a lock, not the way a substitute matches an original. He looked at her. Alastair said that. The key and the lock. Alastair is smarter than he pretends, she said. Most people in hell are. She turned to face him fully and for the first time the full weight of her attention was entirely forward, nothing held in reserve, everything present. I need to tell you something that I have not told anyone else. Tell me. The deal I made, she said. When I left. It was with heaven, yes, but the mechanism of it, the reason it was necessary, was Zestial. He went still. Zestial approached me 40 years ago, she said. He had developed a theory, he's been developing it for centuries, in the patient way he does everything, about the nature of hell and what would happen if it was ever given real coherent leadership. Not Lucifer's leadership, which was always more symbolic than operational. Real administrative, philosophical, ground-level leadership. He believed that hell under genuine order would eventually challenge heaven's authority in ways that the current truce couldn't accommodate. So he wanted you gone, Izuku said. He made me an offer, she said. Dressed as a warning. Leave, or what comes next for Charlie and Lucifer and everything I'd spent millennia building would be his to use against heaven in a war that would cost everything. She paused. I chose to leave because I thought removing myself from the equation removed Zestial's leverage. That without the Morningstar throne occupied, hell would stay fractured enough to be manageable. But it didn't, Izuku said. It just got worse. The extermination escalated, hell fell into the kind of chaos that damaged the population, Charlie's project had no protection, and Zestial got exactly the fractured hell he claimed he didn't want. Yes, she said, and that single word carried the full weight of a decades-long mistake acknowledged without flinching. He looked at her. At the amber eyes that were looking back at him with the particular expression of someone who has just handed you a loaded gun and is watching to see what you do with it. He lied to you, Izuku said. The war was never the goal. The goal was always the vacancy. A hell without Morningstar leadership is easier to philosophically control, not through force, through narrative. He's been writing the story of what hell is for decades without anyone coherent enough to write a different one. Lilith was very still. I know, she said softly. I worked that out approximately 5 years too late. Then why tell me now? She looked at him. Because you're the different story, she said. And you need to know what you're walking into when Zestial stops being patient. They walked back to the hotel in a silence that was different from the silence they'd walked out in, fuller, weighted with the things that had been put into it. The city noise resumed its normal register around them as they moved back into the denser streets. At the hotel door, Lilith stopped. One more thing, she said. He waited. The crown, she said. You can feel it. I know you can, it's been settling toward you since you arrived, anyone sensitive enough to read the architecture can see it. Hell's deep structure is trying to formalize what's already practically true. She looked at him. When it settles, it will be complete and it will be permanent and it will change every negotiation you're currently in the middle of. Every overlord who's been cautiously watching will have to make a real choice. I know, he said. And you're not afraid of that. I'm not afraid of that. She studied him one final time. Then she did something he hadn't expected. She stepped forward and placed one hand against his chest, palm flat, the gesture of someone taking a reading or conferring something, and the amber of her eyes went briefly deep and warm and ancient in a way that the rest of her presentation had carefully managed. He felt it, a pulse from her hand, something that moved through him and moved through one for all and was recognized by both, and what it felt like was confirmation. The specific sensation of a very long calculation reaching its final answer. Good, she said. Quietly. Just the word. Then she dropped her hand and opened the hotel door. Inside, Charlie was waiting exactly where they'd left her, and had clearly been waiting the entire time, which she was trying to look casual about and failing at because Charlie's casualness was a performance that required more maintenance than she was currently able to give it. Vaggie was in the hallway. She'd been watching the door. Lilith walked in and looked at her daughter and said, with the particular softness of someone putting down something heavy that they'd been carrying in secret, I have a lot to explain. Yeah, Charlie said. You do. And I'm going to. All of it. But first, Lilith looked around the hotel lobby, taking it in again, more slowly this time, the way you look at something you're trying to commit to memory or understand as permanent. Tell me about this place. Your father couldn't do it justice in his descriptions and I don't think anyone else who talked to me understood it the way you do. Charlie's expression did the full range, complicated, hurt, tentatively hopeful, arriving at the genuine warmth that was its default state, in approximately 3 seconds. Then she started talking, and when Charlie talked about her hotel the room changed character, because she was genuinely extraordinary when she was describing what she believed in and didn't know it. Izuku sat in the corner. Vaggie came and stood beside him, which was where she stood now, and watched Charlie and Lilith, and the quiet between them had the quality it always had, complete, no performance, two people who had gotten past the stage of needing to fill space. You knew she was coming, Vaggie said, very quietly. I thought she was. What did she tell you? Outside. He looked at her sideways. Zestial. The real shape of what he's been doing. He paused. He's the reason Lilith left. He leveraged her love for Charlie into a 40-year exile by making her believe her presence was the danger. Vaggie was still. He manipulated her, she said. Yes. Patiently. Over decades. He looked at Charlie and Lilith across the room. And it worked until it didn't. Until you. Until the structure of hell started organizing around something he couldn't predict, he said. He didn't account for a soul carrying one for all landing here and being recognized by hell's deep architecture as something that fit the vacancy. Vaggie looked at him. In the warm light of the hotel lobby her expression was the most open he'd seen it, all the careful management that she wore as standard procedure was present but thin, worn through in places, the way a path gets worn through by repeated honest use. So when he moves, she said, it won't be the patience anymore. No. When he moves it'll be because he's concluded that patience has run its course. He paused. He told me what he was going to do. He said it clearly, what you build will be tested. He's been watching to see what I build. Waiting to understand the shape of it so he can find the angle. And now Lilith is back, Vaggie said. Exactly. She thought about it. He could see her processing, the intelligence that her combat presentation usually consumed, freed up to run the scenario. She changes the power map completely, Vaggie said. She's the legitimate Morningstar authority. Charlie's project gets, it goes from a princess's charity to a queen-endorsed institution. Zestial loses the narrative that this is a peripheral project. And loses his claim that Hell's natural state is what it's been for the past 40 years, Izuku said. Because the past 40 years was manufactured. It was a story he told by removing the people who would have told a different one. Vaggie looked at him. You're going to confront him? Yes. When? When I know the full shape of what he's planning. He turned to look at her directly. I'm not going to walk into that conversation until I'm holding every card available. Not because I'm afraid of him. Because I want to win cleanly. She looked at him. Then, with the specific decision of someone committing to something they've been approaching for a while, then I'll help you find the cards. He held her gaze. Yeah, he said. Yeah, she said. No qualification. No hedging. The flat clean certainty of someone making a choice they've been working toward for weeks without knowing it. He nodded. Okay. Across the room, Charlie had reached a part of the hotel explanation that involved showing Lilith the intake system, and Lilith was listening with the full attention of someone who'd spent 40 years being told by the universe what her daughter was doing and was now, finally, seeing it with her own eyes. Something in Lilith's expression, as she listened, shifted toward the particular quality that Izuku recognized from his own history, the look of a very powerful person discovering that the thing they were most afraid they'd failed at had in fact survived and grown in their absence, and having to process the relief and the guilt of that simultaneously. He looked away. That was a private reckoning and it deserved privacy. Carmilla arrived that evening. Not with ceremony, not with representation. Alone, at the back entrance, which she'd apparently known existed, and she came in during the hour when the hotel's main hall was in its quieter configuration and found Izuku at the table with his notebook and Vaggie across from him with the intel she'd been compiling on Zestial's network, 3 weeks of observations, patterns, the movements of things in hell that moved around him like water around a stone. Carmilla looked at the table. At the papers. At Vaggie's expression, which was focused and operational in a way that was new. You're preparing, Carmilla said. Yes, Izuku said. Sit down. She sat. She looked at the papers. Her eyes moved across Vaggie's work with the practiced speed of someone who had spent centuries reading threat assessments. Lilith's back, she said. Since this morning. I felt her arrive. The whole city felt it, anyone worth feeling things felt it. She looked at him. Zestial will have felt it too. I know. He's going to move soon. Possibly within days. She placed her hands flat on the table, and that gesture, the palms down, here is the reality of things gesture, had the quality of a decision enacted. I want to tell you where his anchor points are. Izuku looked at her. You've been waiting, he said. Since that first conversation. You knew pieces of Zestial's network and you've been holding them until you decided what to do with them. I needed to know what you were going to do with them, she said. Whether your goal was consolidating your own position or actually protecting the structure of this place. And now you know. You broke Vox's binding and gave him a door instead of a war, she said. You walked Valentino to the edge of an outcome that would have cost him everything and let him retreat. You sat with Zestial and argued philosophy instead of power. She looked at him. You're trying to build something that holds without needing to be held up by constant force. Yes. She stopped. Something moved in her expression, briefly, before her control reasserted itself. That's very different from the standard model. The standard model isn't working, he said. This place has been eating itself for 40 years. She looked at him for a long moment. In the warm light of the evening hotel her face had the quality it occasionally showed in unguarded moments, the age underneath the control, the centuries of it, and underneath the centuries something that had not stopped being capable of caring despite the time and despite the cost of caring in hell. Zestial has 3 anchor points in the city, she said. Physical loci where he's concentrated influence over long periods. Disrupting them wouldn't destroy him but it would force him to operate without the passive support network he's built. Make him come to you directly instead of working through the infrastructure. Where? Vaggie said, already reaching for a pen. Carmilla told them. That night, after everyone had dispersed to their respective corners of the hotel, Izuku was on the roof when Charlie found him. She came up alone, which was different from her usual pattern of having Vaggie within arm's reach when she did anything on the hotel's upper levels. She sat beside him, closer than she usually sat, and pulled her knees up and looked at the city without speaking for a while. He let the silence be. She's here, Charlie said finally. Not about any immediate logistical concern. Just, the fact of it, needed saying. She's actually here. Yeah. It's weird, she said. I've been wanting this for so long that I'd started treating it like something that happened in a different version of the story. And now it's real and I don't know what to do with all the, she stopped. With all the feelings about it. You don't have to do anything with them tonight, he said. I know. A pause. She told me she talked to you. When you walked. Yes. She told me, she said. Charlie was choosing her words carefully, which was unusual for her. She was normally someone who trusted her first instinct about language. She said you were honest with her. About everything. Including me. He looked at her. I meant what I said to her, he said. She looked down at her hands. In the city glow her profile was lit from below, and the warmth that was the constant quality of her was present at full register, not managed, not performed. I know you did, she said quietly. That's not, I believe you. She looked up at him. It's a lot. You know. Everything that's happened since you got here, everything that's changing, and now Mom being back, and Zestial, and, she exhaled. I keep waiting for the part where I'm supposed to feel overwhelmed. Are you? She thought about it. No, she said, with something like surprise. I should be, probably. By any reasonable metric this is an overwhelming number of large things happening simultaneously. She looked at him. But I'm not. He looked back at her. Good, he said. Hold on to that. She looked at him for a long, quiet moment, and in that moment the warmth in her expression went past its normal register into something different, more specific, more directed, less the general warmth of Charlie's personality and more the particular warmth of a person looking at a specific other person and knowing exactly what they're feeling about them. She leaned forward and kissed him. Not long. Not complicated. The honest, specific, unperformed kind of kiss that is exactly and only what it is, with nothing hidden underneath it and nothing borrowed from performance. When she pulled back, she looked at him with the expression of someone who has done the thing they decided to do and is not apologizing for it. Okay, she said. Good. He looked at her. The green luminescence that moved through him like a tide had done something in the last 30 seconds, warmed, expanded, the way it did when something real happened. Good, he agreed. She smiled. The real one, the one that surprised her and then didn't. She stood up, brushing off her coat. Don't stay up too late, she said. Vaggie's going to want to start on Carmilla's intel at first light and she won't wait for you to finish brooding. I don't brood. You absolutely brood, she said. Beautifully, heroically, with perfect posture, but you brood. She moved toward the access door. At the door she paused. Izuku, she said. Yeah. Thank you, she said. For choosing this. For choosing here. A pause. For not making me feel crazy for believing it could be something. He looked at her. It's already something, he said. She smiled one more time, small, genuine, the one that arrived before she could manage it, and went back downstairs. He turned back to the city. Below, hell churned and roared and lit itself in its permanent red-orange blaze, and somewhere in its depth, in the ancient patient places where Zestial kept his stillness, something was calculating. Timing it. reading the shape of what had assembled itself around the Hazbin hotel and deciding when the long-prepared answer would be delivered. He felt it. The same way he'd felt every threat in his life, not with fear, but with the clean focused attention of someone who has learned to read the weather. Storm coming. He opened his notebook. Wrote, Day 17. Lilith here. Carmilla's intel confirmed. Zestial's anchor points mapped. Charlie. He stopped. Wrote, Ready. Closed the notebook. The city blazed below him, and the crown above his head was so close now it was practically touching, and somewhere in the deep architecture of hell a door was opening that had been closed for longer than most things in this place had existed. He sat with it. He was not afraid. He was ready. Chapter 6, Overlord's Vow. Zestial moved on the 18th day. Not at dawn, not at midnight, at the precise middle of hell's artificial afternoon, when the city noise was at its peak and the streets were fullest, and any shockwave from what he was about to do would be felt by the maximum number of things. That was the tell. Zestial didn't choose noon out of convenience. He chose it because he wanted witnesses. He wanted hell to see what happened when something ancient and patient finally decided to stop being patient. Izuku felt it start from 3 blocks away. He was in the hotel's main hall with Vaggie going through Carmilla's anchor point map when the spiritual architecture of the city shifted, not the subtle shimmer of a binding or the localized pulse of a power move, but something tectonic. Deep and broad and moving outward from multiple points simultaneously. 3 points. Carmilla's 3 locations, activated in sequence. He was on his feet before Vaggie finished her sentence. That's, all 3 at once, he said. He knew we had the locations. He moved before we could disrupt them. He was already at the door. Get Charlie. Get Lilith. Get everyone to the main hall and keep them there. And you? He looked at her. I'm going to go introduce myself properly, he said. She grabbed his arm. Not to stop him, her grip wasn't stopping him and she knew it. Just contact, immediate and honest, the gesture of someone who has gotten past performing the things they feel and has decided to just feel them. Don't do anything I wouldn't do, she said. You do everything I'm about to do, he said. The corner of her mouth moved. Yeah, she said. I would. She let go. Come back. He went through the door. Outside, the city had already started reacting. The ambient noise had changed register, lower, more uncertain, the specific frequency of a population that has lived through enough upheaval to recognize when something large is tilting. Demons that had been going about their business were finding reasons to be indoors. The streets were draining with the instinctive speed of things that didn't know what was coming but knew enough to want walls between themselves and it. The 3 anchor points Carmilla had identified were creating a triangle around the hotel district, and what they were doing was simple in concept and devastating in execution. They were drawing on hell's deep infrastructure and redirecting it, channeling the spiritual architecture of the place into a suppression field. Not an attack. A cage. The kind of long-prepared, precisely calibrated working that took decades to set up and minutes to trigger. Inside the cage, anything that ran on hell's native power would be cut off from it. Not Izuku. One for All didn't run on hell's native power, it ran on something else entirely, something that had come through death with him and had no dependency on the local infrastructure. But Charlie's power did. Lilith's did. The hotel's structural warmth, the thing that made it what it was rather than just a building, all of it had roots in hell's deep grid, and Zestial was trying to sever those roots. He was trying to make the hotel just a building. Izuku walked toward the nearest anchor point at a pace that wasn't quite running. It was the forward momentum of someone who has decided on direction and sees no reason to manage the speed, one for all moving through him like a tide coming in, the green luminescence rising from his skin until the air around him was lit, until the alley he moved through was strobed with it. The anchor point was in the foundation of an old tower 3 blocks north, old enough to have been there before most of what surrounded it, built into the stone with the patience of something that had been placed and then left to deepen for decades. He felt it from half a block away, the specific resonance of Zestchul's methodology, ancient, cold, precise, the work of someone who thought in centuries. He pressed his hand against the tower's base. He felt the anchor, its shape, its depth, the way it had grown tendrils through the infrastructure beneath it like a root system. It was sophisticated. More sophisticated than Vox's binding by an order of magnitude, more patient than anything else he'd encountered here. He pushed one for all into it. Not the redirected, calibrated pressure he'd used on Vox's work. All of it, the full inheritance of 23 people's worth of accumulated power, compressed and focused through the specific technique he'd spent his entire life developing, the same technique that had once let him flick his finger and redirect a meteor and had sealed a dimensional rift and had, in a different version of this moment, shattered a world's worth of evil. The anchor point shattered in 4 seconds. The feedback hit him like a physical blow. Zestchul had layered defenses in it, tripwires that discharged on disruption, and it was significant, not painful but enormous, like catching a truck rather than stopping it. He absorbed it. Let it move through him and dissipate. Stood up. One down. He turned north and ran. The second anchor point fought back. It was under a market building in the second district, and Zestchul had apparently calculated that the first would fall quickly, because this one was already activating its secondary layer when Izuku arrived, a consciousness in the working, not Zestchul himself but a proxy, something he'd left behind to defend the anchor if the primary failed. It rose from the foundation as something approximate to a shape, vast, old dark, the compressed weight of decades of deliberate cultivation given sudden focus. It hit Izuku with everything it had. He stood in the impact and let it land and didn't move. The proxy's force washed over him and around him and one for all held steady the way it always held steady, the way a lighthouse holds in the kind of weather that sinks ships, and when the wave past Izuku was standing in exactly the same spot with the same expression. He reached into the proxy's architecture with one for all extended at the specific frequency of the anchor below it and pulled. The whole thing came apart, proxy first, structure second, the anchor unraveling like a knot pulled from both ends. The discharge was larger than the first. He caught it, felt it in his bones in the way that reminded him he was a soul without a body to break, which meant the sensation was pure and specific and enormous but had no consequences beyond the momentary fullness of it. 2 down. The third anchor was different. It was at the center of a plaza that Izuku recognized from Carmilla's map, broad, open, old stone that predated the current city by several eras. Zestchul was standing next to it. Not proxied. Not remotely managed. He was there in person, hands folded, dressed in the same dark layered deliberateness he'd worn to the hotel, and he was watching Izuku cross the plaza with the expression of someone who had expected exactly this and had been waiting with the patience that was his fundamental quality. The third anchor was active. Fully active, drawing on the infrastructure beneath it at maximum capacity, and the suppression field it was generating was strong enough that Izuku could feel the edges of it, the way it pressed against Hell's normal spiritual atmosphere, the way it was already dimming things in the hotel's direction. He had to break this one fast. "Mr. Midoriya," Zestchul said. "You're faster than I calculated." "You calculated I'd take more time on the first 2, Izuku said, still walking forward. "I calculated you'd take time on all 3, Zestchul said. "And that the suppression field would be complete before you reached this point." A small pause. "I was wrong about the speed. Not about the outcome." Izuku stopped 10 feet away. He looked at Zestchul. At the anchor behind him. At the suppression field's edges pressing outward, and at the hotel district behind him where the air had already gone slightly less warm, slightly less itself. "Move away from the anchor," Izuku said. "No," Zestchul said. And his voice had the quality it had had in the hotel, deep water, absolute patience, but underneath it now was something else. Not urgency. Not fear. Something that was the emotional equivalent of finality. The voice of someone who has made a decision they are fully at peace with and intends to see through. "Let me tell you what this accomplishes, Mr. Midoriya. Not the suppression field, that was the opening, not the conclusion. What this accomplishes is clarity. What clarity? The clarity of a test that cannot be argued with. He tilted his head. Every overlord in this city is watching right now. Every power in hell that matters is observing this moment. They've been watching you for 18 days, measuring you, deciding what you are. They're not decided yet, not fully, not in the way that matters. They need to see you in direct confrontation with something that is not a proxy, not a challenge of positioning or philosophy, but an actual collision of what you are against what hell's oldest principle is. Izuku looked at him steadily. You're giving me a proving ground. I'm giving hell a proving ground, Zestial said. With you as the experiment. He unfolded his hands. If you're what I believe you are, what the architecture suggests you are, then you'll break this anchor through me, and what happens after will be what should happen. Hell will have its answer and I will have mine. His eyes were the deep still color they always were. And if you're not, if the weight of direct opposition is too much, then hell also has its answer, and the vacancy remains. Izuku looked at him. He understood it completely. Zestial wasn't attacking the hotel because he hated it. He wasn't attacking Charlie because he wanted her destroyed. He was, in his ancient and patient and entirely genuine way, doing the most honest thing he was capable of, forcing a real answer to the real question. Is this thing real, or is it performance? Okay, Izuku said. He moved. Zestial was the oldest thing Izuku had fought. Not the strongest, strength wasn't Zestial's idiom. His power was depth, accumulated over so many centuries that it had become geological, the kind of force that didn't strike so much as it pressed, the weight of time and patience made kinetic. He moved through the fight the way tides move, with an inexorability that didn't need speed because it knew it would get there eventually. The first exchange happened in the 3 seconds it took Izuku to close the distance. Zestial extended something that was less an attack and more an imposition, a wave of that ancient weight pressing outward, trying to slow, to stagger, to make the approaching thing understand through sensation what it was dealing with. Izuku moved through it. Not around, through, because closing the distance was the only answer to that kind of power. You had to get inside the tide before it could build momentum, and inside it the wave had no angle. He came through the pressure front and the cold of it hit him like deep water, and one for all rose to meet it, and the collision point between them lit the plaza in green and deep red. Zestial was strong up close. Genuinely, significantly strong, the strength of something that had been adding to itself since before the city they were standing in had foundations. His hands came up and the darkness in them was specific and directed, and it pressed against one for all the way mountains press against rivers, not blocking, just there, enormously, requiring that you go around or push through. Izuku pushed through. They moved across the plaza in the specific terrible dance of a real fight between real powers, no performance, no strategy announced, just two things that knew what they were doing using everything they had. Zestial's methodology was to contain, to redirect, to use Izuku's own force against the anchor's defense. Izuku's was to find the center and push. He got hit. Not once, several times, the accumulated weight of Zestial's centuries landing in specific focused pulses that were the closest thing to precision strikes Zestial had in his toolkit. They were enormous. Each one moved him, not backward, sideways, the force too large to absorb entirely without motion. He let them move him because the alternative was fighting the physics of it, and fighting physics was a tax on attention he needed elsewhere. He got hit and he kept moving forward. Every time. Because that was what he did. Had always done. Would always do. The green of one for all rose higher, not in response to being hurt, not as a defense mechanism, but as the natural expression of pushing something to the level where your full weight was simply the answer. The predecessors were there, not as voices but as presence, all 23 of them in the current, and what they contributed wasn't power, the power was already there, it was will, the accumulated will of 23 people who had refused to stop. He caught Zestial's next strike with both hands and held it. The plaza shook. The force between them was enormous. Izuku's hands locked around the extension of Zestial's power, green and red dark grinding against each other at the contact point, and the stone beneath them cracked outward in a radial pattern. Zestial pushed. Izuku held. For 5 full seconds they were a still point in the middle of a shaking world. Then Izuku pushed back. He put one for all into it, clean, total, nothing held in reserve, and Zestial's ancient depth met something it had not encountered in centuries of existence, a force that was simply, completely, entirely unwilling to stop. Zestial moved backward. 1 step. Just one. But in the geometry of this fight, 1 step backward for Zestial was the answer to the question that everyone watching had been waiting for. Izuku closed the distance between them in the moment of that step, moved past Zestial's guard, and reached the anchor. He pressed his hand to it. He poured one for all into the foundation of it, the full specific pressure of everything he was, and it cracked, and it shattered, and the discharge came up through his arm and across his chest, and one for all absorbed it the way it absorbed everything, completely, without complaint, the way something absorbs what it was made to absorb. The suppression field collapsed. Across the hotel district, 3 blocks away, the warmth returned. The hotel came back online, fully, and Izuku felt it even from here, the specific quality of Charlie's project at full strength, alive and warm and complete. He stood at the center of the broken anchor with his hand still against the stone. Then he turned around. Zestial was standing where he'd been pushed back to. Straight, composed, no evidence of damage beyond the specific stillness of someone who has just spent everything they had on a single effort. His deep-water eyes were on Izuku, and in them was something Izuku hadn't seen there before. Not defeat. Something more honest than defeat. Completion. There it is, Zestial said quietly. Izuku walked back to him. Stopped 2 feet away. You're going to stop, Izuku said. Not a threat. A statement of the new reality. Yes, Zestial said. Not because I beat you. Because you have your answer. Zestial looked at him for a long moment. The deep-water eyes were steady and old and fully present. Hell needed this question answered, he said. It has been unanswered for 40 years. I have been the one asking it because no one else would. He paused. I was not wrong about what hell needed. I was wrong about what the answer would be. You thought the answer was no one, Izuku said. I thought the answer was no one yet, Zestial said, with precision. I was prepared to wait. I did not expect, he stopped. For the first time in either of their interactions, Zestial stopped and chose a different sentence. I did not expect someone who moved the way you move. Forward, Izuku said. Always forward, Zestial said. Through everything. Without the fear that makes powerful things hesitate. He tilted his head slightly. You know what that is in Hell's terms. Tell me. It is the quality that everything in this place has been waiting for and telling itself it didn't need, Zestial said. The quality of someone who protects because they choose to, not because they have to. That is not a Hell quality. It was never a Hell quality. But perhaps it is now. Izuku held his gaze. Then he extended his hand. Zestial looked at it. Then he took it, the handshake, formal, complete, with the weight of everything they'd just done in it. Don't move against the hotel again, Izuku said. I won't, Zestial said. They stood in the broken plaza with the city reorienting itself around the new shape of things, and somewhere above both of them, in the space that wasn't quite visible but was entirely real, the crown descended. He felt it happen on the walk back. Not a ceremony. Not an announcement. No trumpets, no declaration, no moment staged for an audience. Just the deep architecture of Hell reaching a conclusion it had been working toward for 18 days, the calculation completing, the recognition becoming permanent. The crown settled. It didn't change how he looked. Didn't manifest as an object, didn't create an announcement in the spiritual infrastructure. It was internal, the difference between being the thing the structure was organizing around and being acknowledged as the thing the structure was organizing around. The difference between de facto and actual. He stopped in the middle of a street and stood with it for a moment. It was heavy. That was the first real thing about it, genuinely, specifically heavy, not in a painful way but in the way that real things had real weight, and weight was something you carried honestly or not at all. He started walking again. He'd carry it honestly. The hotel came into view and there were people outside it. Not a crowd, a gathering. Carmilla, who had come from wherever she'd watched the fight, standing with the particular posture of someone who has processed a new reality and arranged themselves within it. Lilith, who was standing next to Charlie with her hand on Charlie's shoulder and an expression that had passed through several stages and arrived at something clear. Vaggie at the door, arms crossed, expression doing the thing it did when she was managing something significant and succeeding at it. Angel on the steps, who saw Izuku coming down the street and said, loud enough to carry, "He's back." Called it. "You said he'd be back in 20 minutes, Nifty said from the doorway. "It's been 43. "I said he'd be back," Angel said. "I didn't say when." "Read the room, Nifty." Izuku reached the front of the hotel. Charlie stepped forward from beside Lilith and looked at him, the full assessment, head to foot, cataloging damage, finding less than she'd feared and letting the relief of that show. Then she looked at his face. "Done?" she said. "Done," he said. She exhaled. Then she did something that surprised everyone including herself. She grabbed the front of his jacket and pulled him down into a hug that had the force of someone who had been managing their fear about this for 43 minutes and was now not managing it at all. He put his arms around her. She said something against his shoulder, too quiet to hear, and he heard it anyway. "Good," he said. She let go. Stepped back. Pulled herself together with the speed of someone who was embarrassed by nothing but was aware of an audience. Vaggie was looking at the middle distance with the focused attention of someone who had decided to give a moment privacy it was technically having in public. Lilith was looking at Izuku with that amber-eyed clarity she'd been using since she arrived. She walked forward and stopped in front of him and looked at him for a long moment. "The crown settled," she said. "Yes. I felt it. I know." She held his gaze. Then she turned to the gathered group, Carmilla, Vaggie, Charlie, Angel, Nifty in the doorway, and said, with the voice that had been speaking with authority for longer than any of them had existed, "Hell has an overlord. A real one. The first since the throne went empty." She looked back at Izuku. "I'd like to discuss what that means for the structure of this place when you're ready." "Tonight," he said. "Give me an hour." She nodded. Moved back toward the hotel. Carmilla came forward next. She looked at him with the assessing expression she always had, and underneath it was the thing he'd been watching develop since their first conversation, the specific respect of someone who operates at the highest level of their field watching someone else operate at the highest level of theirs. "Well done," she said. Simply. No performance in it. "Thank you for the anchor locations," he said. "Thank you for using them." A pause. "We should talk about what a formal alliance looks like. When you're ready." "Tomorrow," he said. She nodded. Moved away. Vaggie was last. Everyone else had filtered into the hotel, following Lilith and Charlie inside, and Vaggie was standing at the door with her arms uncrossed now, which he'd learned was its own specific thing. Vaggie with uncrossed arms was Vaggie not behind her walls. He stopped in front of her. She looked at him. At the damage that was there if you knew what to look for, the places where Zestial's ancient weight had landed, the specific way he was holding his left shoulder, nothing serious, the disadvantage of having no body to break meaning the sensation lived somewhere else instead. "How bad?" she said. "Not bad," he said honestly. He was strong. "But I've been hit harder." "Name one time." "The rift," he said. "Everything that came through it at the end." She accepted that. "Zestial won't move against us again." He paused. He got his answer. Good answer or bad answer for him? He seemed satisfied, Izuku said. Which is the Zestial version of a good answer. She looked at him for a long moment. The city behind him was still doing the thing it had been doing since the anchors fell, reorienting, resettling, the spiritual geography of the district shifting around the new weight of what the hotel was now that it had something permanent behind it. You felt it, she said. The crown. I could tell when you came down the street. Something was different. It settled, he said. What does that feel like? He thought about it. The honest answer, not the performed one. Heavy, he said. Real. Like everything I've been doing since I got here just became officially permanent. He met her gaze. Like there's no version of this where I leave. She held his gaze. There was never a version of this where you'd leave, she said. I figured that out around day 4. He looked at her. In the doorway light her face was fully lit, nothing managing it, the sharp intelligence and the specific beauty and the careful honest courage of it. Vaggie, he said. Don't make it a thing, she said. I'm not making it a thing. Good. I'm just going to say one thing, he said. She waited. I see you, he said. The actual you. Not the soldier, not the ex-exorcist, not Charlie's girlfriend turned something complicated. You. And you're extraordinary. She looked at him. The walls were down. All the way down, in a way he'd never seen from her, and what was underneath them was someone who was fully present and not apologizing for it. Don't make me say it back, she said. You don't have to say anything, he said. She looked at him for one more beat. Then she stepped forward and kissed him, quick, deliberate, with the specific decisive quality of someone who has thought about a thing long enough and has decided to stop thinking and just do it. She stepped back. There, she said. That happened. It did, he said. We're not discussing it right now, she said. There's a meeting with Lilith and Carmilla and probably Alastair will try to make it a whole event, and Charlie is going to want to debrief everything that happened today, and Angel is definitely going to ask questions, and Nifty is going to make something elaborate for dinner. All of that is true, he said. So we're going inside, she said. We're going inside, he agreed. She turned and went through the door. He followed. The meeting that night lasted 4 hours. Lilith and Carmilla at the main table, Charlie beside Izuku, Vaggie across from them, Alastair in his corner with his staff and his smile and the genuine attention he gave to situations he found interesting, which this qualified as on every metric he had. They mapped the new shape of things. Zestial's network, now dormant. Vox, who had sent a message 2 hours after the anchors fell that said, with remarkable efficiency, I'd like to have that conversation now, which was as close to a white flag as Vox was constitutionally capable of. Valentino, still quiet, still calculating, but calculating in a new framework now that the framework had changed. The hotel as a formal institution, no longer Charlie's project in the peripheral sense, a recognized and protected structure within Hell's power arrangement, with the authority of the new Overlord and the returned Morningstar Queen behind it. Charlie argued for an expansion of the intake program. Lilith argued for a formal charter that would make the hotel's status legally clear within Hell's political structure. Carmilla argued for a defensive alliance that would bind 3 of Hell's remaining power centers against interference. Izuku listened to all of it, asked questions that were specific and useful, and when he said things they were the kind of things that moved the room forward rather than back. Alastair, at one point, looked at Izuku with his layered smile and said, "You're not going to give a speech, are you? A declaration. Something with appropriate gravitas." "No," Izuku said. "I told Charlie you wouldn't," Alastair said, with evident satisfaction. "Why wouldn't you?" Lilith asked. Izuku looked at her. "Because the work is the declaration," he said. "Everything that needed saying has already been said. What we're doing now is the speech." He looked around the table, Lilith, Carmilla, Charlie, Vaggie, Alastair. "This is what it looks like when Hell decides to be something different." Silence around the table. Then Charlie said, "I want to frame that and put it on the wall." "It's going next to the panic plaque," Vaggie said. "What's the panic plaque?" Carmilla asked. "You don't want to know," Angel said from the staircase, where he'd been listening for at least an hour. Lilith looked at her daughter and then at Izuku and then back at her daughter, and the expression on her face was the one he'd seen briefly when she'd first walked through the hotel and heard Charlie talk, the pride, clear and present, and underneath it something that was perhaps the most honest thing Lilith had shown since she'd arrived, relief. The specific deep relief of someone who had been afraid they'd broken something irreparably and had found it not only intact but thriving. She looked at Izuku. He looked back. She inclined her head, minimal, precise, the gesture of someone who does not bow and is not bowing but is acknowledging something as equal to equal. He returned it. Later, after the meeting had concluded and the hotel had settled into its late-night rhythms, Carmilla gone, Lilith retired to the room Charlie had prepared for her, Alastair vanished in his usual way, Angel upstairs, Izuku was alone in the main hall with his notebook. He wrote. Not strategy, not analysis. He wrote the shape of the day, the plaza, the fight, the weight of Zestial's centuries and the moment of the step backward, the crown settling on the street between the plaza and the hotel, Carmilla's clean and specific respect, Lilith's amber eyes, Charlie's arms, Vaggie's decision at the door. He wrote until the pen moved slower, until the account was complete, until what was in the room was the quiet that comes after things have been done and set down and can be returned to without needing to be resolved. He closed the notebook. Outside, the city was at its version of quiet, the low roar it carried even at its most subdued, the permanent fire of hell's sky painting everything in the colors it always used. Through the hotel window it looked the same as it had looked on his first night. The same towers, the same lights, the same deep red-orange sky. But the weight of the place was different. It had been different for days, incrementally, each shift barely perceptible on its own but accumulating into something significant. And tonight it had settled into its final shape, or not final, nothing was ever final, but current, the shape of now, which was the only shape that actually mattered. Charlie's voice from the staircase, not directed at him, she was talking to her mother in the corridor above, something about rooms and morning plans and the small logistics of a life being rebuilt, her voice carrying the warmth it always carried, a little fuller tonight, a little less managed. Vaggie's footsteps on the landing, specific, light, the tread of someone who moved with precision even when they weren't working. The hotel breathed around him, warm and present and entirely itself. He sat with it. He thought of Toshinori's face. Of the rift closing. Of the warmth of something finishing that had turned out to be something beginning. He thought, I didn't end up here by accident. He thought, this was always where One for All was going. Not because the universe had planned it, not because fate had a blueprint, he didn't believe in those things. He believed in force and direction. He believed that if you moved forward hard enough and honestly enough toward what mattered, the world eventually arranged itself around that movement. Not smoothly. Not without cost. But it arranged itself. Hell had arranged itself. He looked out at the city, his city now, in the way that places become yours not through ownership but through the weight of what you've done in them, and felt the crown in the way he'd been carrying it all evening, present, real, honestly heavy. He didn't feel like an overlord. He felt like himself. Which was, he was beginning to understand, exactly the same thing. He opened the notebook one more time. Wrote a single line, Day 18. It begins. Closed it. Outside, hell burned on, red and gold and inexhaustible, full of people who had ended up here the same way he had, through the consequences of the lives they'd lived, and in the hotel behind him the warmth of Charlie's idea, which was now something larger than an idea, pressed outward against the city the way warmth presses against cold, the way any real thing presses against the space around it just by existing, just by refusing to be less than it was. He sat there a while longer. Then he heard Charlie say his name from the stairs, her voice warm and unhurried, the voice of someone who has decided there is no emergency tonight and is genuinely glad about it. He stood up. Went to meet her. The green light moved with him, steady as a heartbeat, steady as the thing he'd always been, steady as everything it turned out he was going to be, and it lit the hotel as he went, and the hotel was warm, and hell, for the first time in a very long time, had something at its center that wasn't trying to consume it. Something that had chosen, entirely and without apology, to be there.